Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack
and Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff. This week on the show, we are finishing a almost 7-month-long project now, where we have been going back and reviewing in excruciating depth all of the original Star Wars movies, episodes 1 through 6. It started as a project to reevaluate the prequels, sort of in the wake of Star Wars having a controversial couple of years, and kind of going back to the OG Star... Well, no, today is the OG Star Wars controversy.
Yes.
Prequels were maybe controversy 2.0. We're talking about Return of the Jedi today, Sean.
The Jedi have returned.
In some ways, maybe the most fascinating of the 6 to talk about.
It's a weird movie.
It's a weird movie. I said this on Twitter. I don't know how exactly... Like, this is kind of my general position. I think it is Schrodinger's Star Wars movie in that it is both the best Star Wars movie and the worst Star Wars movie at the same time. They're occupying the same space.
Yeah, it basically has the highest highs and the lowest lows of Star Wars.
I pretty much agree. And I'm so excited to talk about it, though, because I fucking love this movie, Sean.
Yes.
Despite that.
Yes, it's a weird movie. It'll be fun to dig into it.
We're also going to talk about a little bit of news, including the announcement of... not the announcement, but the detailing of the new Dragon Ball movie, which has a really fascinating topic, so we're going to get into that. We have 30 seconds of Doctor Who footage from the World Cup we're going to talk about. And we're going to do some stuff. I'm going to talk about Octopath Traveler in a little bit of depth because that game just came out. I'm about 7.5 hours into it. So enough to talk about it. I wish I was right at 8 hours so it could be Octo-hour review of Octopath Traveler.
It's unfortunate.
It really is.
I'm not sure if we should even talk about it yet, honestly.
You really have to get past the 8-hour mark for it to get good.
Yeah.
No, but so that's going to be our show today. I'm excited to do this one. Sean, do you have any stuff that you want to talk about?
I've got a little Monster Hunter update.
Oh, nice.
Not anything huge because that is a big fucking game, obviously, and it's very complicated. And I hit a point basically like yesterday where I felt like I was having a lot of fun with it, but like it was that sense of when you play a game that is mechanically dense and has like all that legacy to it, that this is the first Monster Hunter game I played, so I don't know, everything is completely fresh to me. I finally hit the point where it's like I have my arms around this game. It's like my feet are planted. I understand what's really happening. I know the first 10 or so hours of that game is like you being like, I'm having a lot of fun and I kind of have no idea what the fuck I'm doing. And then they're slowly figuring out, okay, now that's what that is. Okay, that's what I do with that thing. Okay, like that's what this NPC does. And then now I have fully kind of understood, I feel like, the loop and am like really into the game. And I had a moment yesterday where I was going on a side quest that just it's one of those moments in a game like this that is really magical with the monsters, which are obviously the star of Monster Hunter, and their AI and all that interacting. And the best part of that game, the best little thing they do, is having the monsters fight each other if you get the right scenario to come about. So I was on a hunt yesterday where I was going after, I think it's called like a Baroth or something like that. It's basically a big rock monster, a big rock lizard thing. And I just wanted to hunt that to get some of its parts. Because he makes some pretty good heavy armor if you get a bunch of the big rocky bits off of him. And so I was hunting one of those things, and while I was going through that process and sort of stalking around and finding his footprints and stuff and kind of picking up a trail, I found his trail and was following it, and then halfway to getting to him, I ended up finding another thing, this weird skid mark on the ground that was unidentified. It was from a monster I had not seen before. I was like, oh, that's cool. I didn't know that there was a monster type in this area that I hadn't seen yet. And I was like, well, before I go at this Baroth or whatever it is, I'm going to go check out what this thing is, and kind of slunk off to the side and ended up in this little kind of lake pond area and saw this giant fish eel monster that was just slithering around, and it looked big and scary. I'm like, well, fuck that. I'm not fighting that thing. I've never fought that thing before. I have no idea what it is. I saw its name pop up, and it's I'm going to leave. I'm glad I have this info, because one of the parts of the loop of that game is you're constantly getting new details about the monsters by picking up little bits and finding out about them, and that fills in stuff on your journal that then you can use to reference it when you hunt the monsters, and so you get better at them the more you learn about them. So it's okay, I know what this thing is. The next time I come into this area, or I'm sure I'm going to get a quest at some point to fight this thing, I will know what I'm doing. Then left and went and picked up the path on the Baroth again, found him, fighting him, big epic fight, jumping all over the place, swinging my giant sword, knocking off his tail, all the good stuff you do in Monster Hunter. You got to lop off the tail because then you can get the tail separately, and that will give you a specific item.
Oh, nice.
Yes, it is. You get very technical. It's not just about killing the monster; it's about knocking every little bit off the monster before you kill it. And so, in the middle of this epic monster fight, I find myself in this big swampy area, and in this like kind of river in this big swampy area. And then all of a sudden, I look over to the edge of where the river is because the like NPC like kind of voice in your ear said something about like, oh, what's that thing doing here? And I look over and I just see this fin swimming up the river. Realize, oh, this river is directly connected to that lake where I spotted this fucking thing before. And then all of a sudden, it leaps out of the water, wraps around the bear off, and it just stands up on its hind legs and is struggling against this giant eel monster. And I just like kind of back up and sit down and is like, well, I'm just gonna watch this for a little bit, and it was fucking awesome. And it basically looked like the scene in King Kong vs. Godzilla where King Kong fights the giant octopus, and it's just the coolest fucking shit.
The real octopus they just put in the movie.
Yes, the real big octopus that the guy in the suit has to like valiantly struggle against. And it was probably very gross on set that day. But yeah, it was a really cool moment where all the AI and systems in that game just linked up in such a way that that's not scripted, that's not something that the game just has happened, but the different AI patterns and the like kind of food tree hierarchy of the game of like, okay, these monsters hunt these kinds of monsters and stuff like that, create these very dynamic scenarios where in the middle of you fighting this giant rock monster, he just gets wrapped around and slimed up by this big fucking fish thing, and you just kind of watch them fight for a little bit. And then eventually the bear-off kind of like threw it off and the thing slithered away, and then I finished off my guy and took his shit and left. And I haven't played the game since then, but it was just like a really cool, fun moment that it speaks to my, Godzilla movie loving heart to just see giant monsters fighting each other and to happen in a way that is very surprising and feels not scripted in any way is really cool.
That's awesome.
Yes. So that game comes from with a high recommendation for me.
To talk about a completely different game, like as different as two games can probably get, although this one arguably also stars a horrible monstrosity. Captain Toad Treasure Tracker.
Yes.
I'm kidding. I love you, Toad. Yes, I love you, Toad, but you are a weird mutant thing. We still don't know if your head is a hat or if it's part of your body. It's very strange. You probably need to get that checked out. I hope it's not cancerous. But yes, on the same day Octopath Traveler came out, we also got Captain Toad Treasure Tracker for the Nintendo Switch. This is the port remake of the Wii U game for the Nintendo Switch. It also came out on 3DS, if you're still rocking your 3DS. I did get the demo for that because I was curious. Works totally fine. It looks very nice for like a 3DS game. I obviously would prefer the Nintendo Switch version because it's out, and I think that game benefits from the things the Switch has. But, if you don't have a Switch and you have a 3DS and you've never experienced the majesty of Captain Toad, you should pick it up there. Anyway, but yes, I picked it up alongside Octopath Traveler. They are two weird games to be playing at the same time, but they are kind of fun complements because, Octopath Traveler is a little more in-depth. There's a lot more going on in it, and then I can kind of back out and be like, I'm going to spend 30 minutes having fun with Captain Toad, watching silly animations and solving fun puzzles. Cool. And I like that. Captain Toad is a great game. I talked about it when it came out back in 2014. It was on my top 10 of the year that year. I think it was pretty high on my list that year. Because that was like the big year of the Wii U.
Yes, it was the bad year for everything else, and then that was it felt like the year where people are like, you know what, the Wii U's pretty good, the Wii U's pretty okay, and everyone else is like you have a PS4 and Xbox One, it's like Shadow of Mordor was fine, and everyone on the Wii is like, we got Bayonetta 2 and fucking Captain Toad and all this shit.
And Smash Bros. Was that year. Yeah. So it was a pretty good year. That was also Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze was that year.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty good year overall. And I really like Captain Toad. I loved it then. I love it now. It's such a unique platformer because I don't even know if it would be right to call it a platformer. You don't jump in it, and I think jumping is kind of like you have to have that for a platformer.
That would be like calling a game a first-person shooter in which you do not shoot.
But it's really tough to describe it any other way. There's no easy genre it goes into because the whole idea is it's a series of very small levels where you, as Captain Toad, have to get to the end and find the star, and along the way there are also 3 diamonds you can pick up, or 3 gems, and then there's an extra goal to 100% each level. So you have to do all those things to 100% the level, and they're these squarish, cubish kind of levels, and you rotate them around to look at all these different nooks and crannies and move Captain Toad through it. And it's really about the manipulation of space and solving little puzzles within the level more than it is about movement-based physics gameplay, which is how you would describe like a platformer.
Yeah.
So it doesn't fit into any easy category, but I love it. I think Captain Toad is not the best Nintendo game, but it's Nintendo at their best. It is Nintendo just being like, you know what? We got a Scrooge McDuck vault full of money. This is a weird thing that was in Super Mario 3D World for 3 levels. Let's make a full game out of it and just have fun being creative, and that's exactly what they do, and it is an absolute delight. I think it's even better on the Nintendo Switch. I think there's a lot of very key improvements they've made. The number one thing being, you can just play the game on your TV and not look down at the gamepad. Because the problem with Captain Toad on Wii U is that these levels have a lot of things you manipulate within the world. Like you have to touch a little panel to move it or something like that. And what you would always have to do with those is you would have to look down at the gamepad and use the touchscreen to interact with those. Which meant, effectively, while it was on your TV in nice HD, you spent a lot of your time looking down at the really ugly Wii U gamepad screen to play the game. And so they haven't made a huge visual improvement to the game. It's 1080p, not 720p, which is nice, but it's not like, they completely remade it or anything. Right. But I'm looking at it being like, wow, this game looks so good. I had no idea this game looked so good. And then I'm like, oh, right, that's because I was looking at it on the shitty little Fisher-Price screen on my Wii U gamepad, and now you don't have to do that. And they've found a pretty elegant solution, I think, for how you can play it just on your TV, which is that your right Joy-Con acts like a Wiimote did, where you can basically, it's got a pointer on the screen, and anything you have to manipulate, you just point at. It uses gyro mechanics. So there's also you don't have to set up like a Wii sensor bar or anything, which would be a weird thing to have to do on your Switch. And you just
Nintendo would find a way.
Nintendo would find a way. Yeah, but you don't have to do that. You just point it at the thing you want to point it at. It's very intuitive, very easy, and you manipulate it with the ZR button, and that's it. And it does mean there's a pointer on screen at all times, which can be a little distracting at first, but I got over that very fast. That's fine. And then if you're playing it on the Switch itself with the Joy-Con attached, it's just touchscreen controls like it was on the gamepad. So, very elegant solution. I think a huge improvement on that level. Looks a lot nicer. In general, it just feels better to play. I don't think they've, added so much to it that, if you got your fill of Captain Toad, you need to buy it again. But if you liked it on Wii U, you would like to play it again without getting your Wii U out, and you would like to just have it kind of archived in a much better format, I would recommend the Switch version. It's very, very good. I'm having fun with it. Captain Toad is delightful.
Cool.
Yeah. So I hope this becomes an annualized franchise from Nintendo, a la Assassin's Creed.
But they just put out this version of the game over and over again. It's not annualized in the sense of it's a bunch of sequels. It's like we improved. We put in 2 new levels.
2 new levels.
And it looks a little bit better each time.
They have added 4 new levels. I have not seen them yet.
They're like Super Mario Odyssey levels, right?
Yes.
They're based on that sort of tile set.
And they look cool. I have not seen them yet. And again, this game has 70 levels in it, so 4 is not a ton.
Yeah.
But I am excited to see those. The one weird thing is, this game is based on the engine of Mario 3D World, the Wii U Mario game. So much so that it has a lot of the same assets. It has a lot. The fonts are all the same. The graphics are the same. It uses some of the same music and stuff. The menu system is very similar. So it is a little odd having all of that and then not being able to go play Mario 3D World on this system. I feel like they should absolutely put that game out. Because obviously if you can get Captain Toad running on it, you could get that running on it. And it would be fun to see that. Maybe they did just put out a Mario game, so I get it. It's just a little odd to have the spin-off, but not the main thing.
I would not be surprised if that was around the corner.
Oh, probably.
In the not too distant future.
Because, I think Nintendo's looking down their spreadsheet at all their Wii U games that undersold, and looking down the spreadsheet at all the Switch games that oversold, and are like, profit.
Yes, yeah. It's just there's also, as we saw at their E3 showcase, there is a big kind of empty spot around their fall lineup that's fucking big. You put fucking Mario Kart 8 out again and it sold like gangbusters. Splatoon 2 is a lot of Splatoon 1 stuff also. It's you put out your fucking Wii U stuff again.
Yeah, I mean, we're almost there for all the major Wii U games because they're not re-releasing Smash Bros, but this new one will have all the stuff from that one in it.
They're doing the Bayonetta stuff.
They already did Bayonetta 1 and 2. They did Donkey Kong. We really need
Zombie U. They need to get Zombie U out there.
No, we don't. I mean, they could. It's on PS4 and
Zombie,
so they could just put it on there.
Take the U off there, get a little switch on there.
Zombitch, yes.
Nobody's going to read that the wrong way.
I was gonna say,
actually, that has got to be a title of something. So there's no way that sorry, Nintendo, it's taken. You can't use it.
All right, I don't know where we were going with this. Sean, you want to do a little bit of news?
What's going on in the news, Jonathan?
All right, first thing. We did have a Doctor Who trailer today, our first official teaser for the new season with Jodie Whittaker as the 13th Doctor, and this aired during the World Cup final in Britain, and we got it, and it's 40 seconds long. I don't think any of this footage will actually be in the show.
No, that did not look like... It did not look like footage from a TV show. Like, it looked nice, and I liked the way, the aesthetic of it was very interesting, but it was not... It was not like, here's clips from the show.
Unless the Doctor has a new fun ability where she can just travel on her own through time without any external device.
Yes.
And she does that just to give people more food and or magazines.
Well, she gave the one lady, she replenished her pizza, which was either a new pizza or the same pizza backwards in time, which is probably defying some sort of, law of...
I think that's a paradox.
Yeah. But then the other dude, the old dude at the bar that's because the other three people were obviously the different companions, but I don't know their names. So the old dude at the bar, he had a magazine, he was reading a magazine, and looked away, and then he looked back, and it was a different magazine. And
he's a companion, too.
Yes, I know.
Yeah,
all three of them are companions. Again, I just don't know their names, so it's young dude, lady, and old dude are the three companions, as far as I know so far. And that was, I don't know why she can give one person a pizza and give the other person a magazine that they didn't want. It just seems unfair. It's ageism, is what it is.
Well, we'll see what the Doctor's bias is. But this is part of the first proper promotional push they're doing for Series 11. Yeah. I think they're probably either done or close to being done with principal photography on the season. So now comes marketing time, and there will probably be a lot of marketing before the season starts. Yeah. But this was the first salvo. Doctor Who got a primo spot at the World Cup, if you want to know how much the BBC still likes this show.
Yeah.
This is not, again, 1980... or late 1970s Doctor Who.
No, yes. Not 1980 where it's just like, fuck this show.
Yeah, no. But I liked the little teaser. I liked getting a reminder of okay, Doctor Who's coming back, thank God.
Yeah. I wish that they had messaged it a little bit to, get expectations in line, because I definitely saw a lot of very, muted reaction online, because I think people were generally expecting it to be a little bit more fully featured, and have it be a more traditional trailer with footage from the first couple of episodes or something.
I wasn't expecting a lot. It was a World Cup thing. It was not going to be more than a minute. But they had they're doing a big blast with Entertainment Weekly for Comic-Con, and they have interviews with everyone. They've put out some pictures that are actual stills from episodes. So I thought, okay, clearly they're going to give us a little taste of something. And it's fine that they didn't, but they didn't message it very well. But, I still think every single time we see the tiniest sliver of Jodie Whittaker in this role, I don't even know how to say it other than she just looks like the Doctor.
Yeah.
And it's a weird thing, because every Doctor has to, right? Uh-huh. But sometimes you don't get that just from the marketing. I remember, if you look back at the early images of Matt Smith in the role before they'd found his costume, the dude does not look like the Doctor he would play or any Doctor. They have done it perfect from the word go with Jodie Whittaker to where it's just oh yeah, she's been the Doctor forever or something, Well,
I think they made a smart choice of, instead of doing the Matt Smith thing where all the original promotional photos from when they announced him was him just in a normal black suit and was clearly not was not his costume, and was not also supposed to evoke a Doctor Who costume. With Jodie Whittaker, they've never really done that. No. Whatever has been directly related to Doctor Who, including the cool YouTube announcement teaser they did, while that was not her costume, it evoked a Doctor Who-esque costume enough that it's okay, that's the Doctor.
Yeah.
It's not that's just a lady wearing pants and a shirt,
Right.
Which is basically what Matt Smith was.
Yes. So I'm just excited. I just want more Doctor Who. I want to see our new Doctor and all our new companions. I am psyched about having a crew again. That's going to be fun. So, not much to say here.
Yeah, for me, I think honestly the biggest takeaway was just sort of getting that sense of, there's going to be three companions, and they're all very different, and the little sense you get in the teaser is it does not seem, at least from what that teaser presented, they didn't try to imply that those companions were connected in any way.
Right.
They seem like three disparate people that are going to be dragged into the Doctor's gravity well, basically.
And that could be fun. That could be an interesting thing to do, because usually when you have sometimes when you have a crew, it's like that, the Fifth Doctor's crew.
Yeah.
Right? But the First Doctor's crew, everyone knew each other.
Yeah, and with the Fifth Doctor's crew, it was the Fourth Doctor picked them up every couple of episodes, added a new stray to the pack, basically, and then the Fifth Doctor just inherited this big gang of people.
That I do not envy Chris Chibnall the task of writing that first episode.
Right,
he has a shit ton to introduce. And hey, historically, when Doctor Who has to do that, it actually rises to the occasion amazingly well. Spearhead from Space, 11th Hour, things like that. But, very excited. It also seemed, I don't think this is footage from the show, but it looks like, footage shot in the mold of the show.
Yeah, it looks like it's going for whatever the aesthetic of the show was. Like, obviously they shot it while they were shooting an episode. Right. They're like, let's put together the promo.
This has been hinted at. It does look like they're doing Doctor Who in a new aspect ratio, which is kind of crazy. It looks like this is popular now among, streaming shows, and I don't know why. But it is the 2.0 to 1 aspect ratio. This is not an aspect ratio you will almost ever see for, a movie or an older TV show or anything. Usually you have 235 to 1, 178 to 1, or 4:3, normal, 133 to 1. Doctor Who had been 16:9 forever. This is that 2.0 to 1. All the Netflix dramas do that. Some of the Amazon dramas do that. I think they think it's more cinematic without quite being widescreen. And I think some shows use it very well, and some don't. I think The Handmaid's Tale on Hulu is one that uses it amazingly well. But, we'll see. It's a small change for Doctor Who, but it is an interesting one. I know they were saying they wanted to go for a more, quote-unquote, cinematic look. Right. I kind of hate when people use that term. Because also, I would say, did you see Heaven Sent? It's perfectly cinematic.
Yeah. It feels, whenever people use that phrase, it just makes me feel like they're talking about a video game. Because that's that was the video game thing for so long, was talking about, making this thing look cinematic. That, when people are talking about it with the TV show, I kind of have to, cross some wires for it to make any sense.
But anyway, we're very excited for Doctor Who.
Yes.
And we're going to cover the shit out of it when there's more to talk about.
Yes. As you can tell by our discussing this teaser being 10 times the length of the teaser.
Yes. All right, speaking of something we're very excited to cover here, Dragon Ball is getting a new movie in December in Japan. We already knew this was coming. We knew Akira Toriyama, the original author, was going to be writing the movie. Same staff as the anime Dragon Ball Super. Dragon Ball Super is done for now so that the staff could go do this movie without pulling their hair out. And this week we got our first firm details of the film, including a poster and a title and a statement from Akira Toriyama. The movie is called Dragon Ball Super Broly.
Yes, Dragon Ball Super Broly.
Broly. It is coming December 14th in Japan. Funimation immediately announced, this was amazing to me, they have already acquired it for North American screenings, so US and Canada, for January 2019, 1 month later. I'm really curious if they're going to have time to dub that.
Right, yeah.
They almost certainly will, because Dragon Ball just gets dubbed, but they're going to have to get on, that's going to be a crazy dub window to do that. Yeah. They will have the home video release as well, so for once Toei and their partners are on the ball in getting this thing out there.
Yeah.
We all remember Dragon Ball Super took a full year to get to Crunchyroll, so yeah. It's awesome, though. Broly is an interesting topic for a movie.
Yes.
If you don't know, maybe you're a casual Dragon Ball fan and you've seen this giant burly Saiyan dude and you're like, where does he come from?
Why does he look exactly like buffed up Trunks from the Cell Saga when Perfect Cell's like, aha, you've sacrificed your speed for power, you fool. And they just took that design.
Because that movie, the first Broly movie, came out around the same time as that was happening in the anime.
Wow, yeah, you're right. It's almost like every other Dragon Ball movie ever, where they just took a thing that happened to the show and put it in the movie.
So, when Dragon Ball Z, the original Z series, was airing in the 80s and 90s, they made 13 theatrical movies, the original Dragon Ball Z movies. These were for
Lucky 13.
Yes, Lucky 13. These are not full-length feature films. They're generally under an hour, although the first Broly movie is a full 75 minutes, which is why it's one of the worst Dragon Ball movies.
It's too long.
But anyway, they would make these basically for anime festivals, and then they would go on a road show around Japan. And Broly was the topic of movies, I believe, 8, 10, and 11. He is a character. He is popular for reasons I don't fully understand, because those movies are generally horrible. I think the second one is pretty good.
Yeah, the second one's definitely the best of the three.
Yes. The second one's, because it's like Gohan and Videl
and Goten and Trunks.
Yep.
And it's like a classic Dragon Ball adventure, going around and getting the Dragon Balls, and then Broly shows up and they kill him.
Yeah, so that one's fine. The first one is the longest of the original Dragon Ball movies, and it is boring as fuck. The third one is Bio Broly, and it's not any good. And Broly is just a dude who goes around and shouts and punches stuff. Yeah.
It's basically the one line of dialogue. Yeah.
My favorite thing is that in the dub, Broly is voiced by Vic Mignogna, who is one of the most famous Funimation voice actors.
Yeah.
He's Edward Elric in Full Metal Alchemist. And you would never know it. Like, there's no reason you need to get Vic Mignogna for that. But I'm like, oh, well, I'm glad they have him now, because I assume he'll have dialogue in the new movie. But Broly is a character who Akira Toriyama had nothing to do with. He did a little bit of character design, as was customary, but at that point, he's working on the manga. The movies were written by a guy named Takao Koyama, who a couple of years ago, when Battle of Gods came out, the first of the new Dragon Ball movies, and Toriyama had come back to the franchise, his triumphant return, Dragon Ball was back. Takao Koyama published a blog post where he kind of was upset about, like, Toriyama's characters now supplanting Broly in terms of power. He was very, I don't know, he was being very, like, what's the word for it, kind of...
Petty
about it, in a weird way. And, so now Toriyama is coming in and taking Koyama's character and doing something with him, and I'm going to read to you, Sean, Akira Toriyama's statement. This is from the website. This is translated by... this is the accompanying translation from the website, so this is up there on the Toei website for the film. And this is Akira Toriyama's statement on the movie, and it is wonderful.
Okay.
Everyone, are you familiar with Broly? He's an incredibly strong Saiyan who only appeared in the old anime movies, and I apparently at least drew the designs for him, but I had practically no involvement with the anime at the time, so I had totally forgotten about the story content. So, about Broly. I hear these days he's still very popular, not only in Japan, but also overseas. Based on that, my editor suggested we have Broly appear in this next movie. I went ahead and watched the movies from back then, and I felt this could be quite interesting once I rearranged some things. I got right to work trying my hand at a story that incorporates him into the Dragon Ball Super series. While keeping in mind Broly's classic image so as not to disappoint the fans, I updated him and added a new side to his character, and I think this has resulted in a more fascinating Broly. Naturally, you'll get to see fierce combat, but also the paths of destiny that lead to an encounter between Goku, Vegeta, and Broly. It also involves the Frieza Force and the history of the Saiyans, which end up having a major connection to everything. The story content turns out to be very large-scale and dramatic. Here comes that almighty Saiyan, Broly. I'm also including lots of other content all you fans will enjoy, so look forward to it, and be patient a while longer for it all to come together.
That's very good.
I love Akira Toriyama so fucking much, Sean.
That's like... the rudest thing that any Japanese press release has ever said.
There are two, you might have missed them, there are two very clear backhanded, slaps at Broly. I watched these and I felt it could be interesting once I rearranged some things. And seeing I think this has resulted in a more fascinating Broly. He's so clearly, what I'm reading between the lines on that is him saying, my editor challenged me to take the worst Dragon Ball character and make him interesting, and I said, I got nothing better to do, so challenge accepted.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing, Sean. If they announced this and Toriyama was not involved, I would roll my eyes and plan to skip this movie. Toriyama is involved, and I can count on probably one hand the people I trust as implicitly as I do Akira Toriyama to get a story right, at least within Dragon Ball.
Yeah.
I trust him 100%. I'm very excited for this, and I am fascinated to see how the actual Dragon Ball author would use Broly in a movie.
Yeah, it's such a weird situation, because the other thing that's important to note is that those movies are strictly non-canonical.
They can't be, yeah.
There's no way. It's one of the most dull and tedious conversations any Dragon Ball fan can have, is trying to be like, oh, but if you take the fucking Cooler movie, can fit in between the Frieza and the Android stuff, it's like, technically yes, you could kind of fit spots for some of them, but then it doesn't make sense for almost any of them, because all of them, there's always he doesn't go Super Saiyan until the end of the movie because it's just the Frieza story, but with Frieza's brother. You know, it's always been that kind of thing. So the movies are strictly non-canonical, till we get to, Battle of Gods, and we get Resurrection F, and the creation of Dragon Ball Super, where those movies are the beginning of Dragon Ball Super, to the point where they just redid them in the TV show Dragon Ball Super. So this is going to be interesting, because they are taking what had up till now been a non-canonical character that had been a fan favorite in Japan and America for reasons that neither of us understand on this podcast. Two Dragon Ball fans.
I do because here's the thing. He has the line about being popular overseas. I actually think that's it. I don't think Broly is that popular in Japan.
He's 100%. Okay. Yes, that's why he's in every fucking Dragon Ball video game. Well, he was one of the first DLC characters announced for Dragon Ball FighterZ.
Well, then I get that. I was just going to say, Broly comes out of a very specific moment in the dub's history where they were doing all the hard rock, heavy metal stuff, and that was when Dragon Ball was like in Hot Topic and stuff. So I can totally tell you why Broly took off in America, and it's because of the moment he came out over here. But I didn't know that about Japan.
No, yes, he's definitely popular in Japan also. And yeah, so I've never quite understood it. The most interesting thing about Broly, and like one of the interesting things about this movie is, in the last arc of Dragon Ball Super, the Tournament of Power arc, they introduce a set of characters that are from the Universe 6 Saiyans. So in Dragon Ball Super, there are multiple universes, and in one of the universes, there is another planet. It's not Planet Vegeta, it's whatever the original Saiyan planet is called. And it's like those Saiyans, and they never got destroyed and all this shit. And so you kind of get this interesting crossover. And with one of those characters, a female Saiyan called Kale, they basically made her more or less Broly, but interesting because she has a character, she has motivation, she has relationships with people. And
she's named Kale?
Yeah, she's named Kale because they all have to be named after vegetables and they're running out.
I just love that Dragon Ball, that's how you know Dragon Ball has come into the 21st century. There's a Saiyan named Kale.
Yes, yeah. But she's a really interesting character because they take basically what is the Broly transformation of this super buffed up, really powerful Super Saiyan that loses all sort of like rationality. It's like the slightly greener hair and all that stuff. They basically put that on her character. But nobody has seen that before. Nobody's like Goku fights her and has no idea anything about Broly because that doesn't exist in this continuity. So there's something weird about then they kind of introduced an element of the Broly character that I thought, I'm fine with the legendary Super Saiyan transformation, whatever you call it. Like, I'm fine with that idea. And they took that and put that in a new character that's a much more interesting base character in Dragon Ball Super. And now they're bringing back the non-canonical character that inspired the new interesting character Dragon Ball Super and putting him into the canon in the movie that comes out later. That is explicitly set after the events of Dragon Ball Super. Like, that's how Frieza and stuff is going to be involved. That's related to Dragon Ball Super stuff.
Yeah, it's called Dragon Ball Super, not just Dragon Ball.
Yes, so it's a weird web they have woven of like canonical and non-canonical material inspiring and creating each other.
Here's my big question.
Yeah.
Will the other Broly movies have happened in this movie?
No.
Think Broly will just be a fresh character like Goku and Vegeta won't know?
100%. Like, I think the way that since they put that kind of transformation into Dragon Ball Super and never directly referenced Broly in any way, like not even a hint at it, it's only if you know who Broly is, you can put two and two together of like that's where this character idea came from. But in like diegetically in Dragon Ball Super, it is never hinted at all. That's what makes me think that those movies just are totally in the void.
Yeah, I mean, because that's the thing. Akira Toriyama almost never took anything from the anime into his stuff. The only real instance of that is Bardock, who he did the design for the anime special, had referenced in the manga, liked the special so much that he put Bardock into the manga canonically and made it very clear that that's a part of the story. But he's almost never done that. He mostly ignores other people's work on Dragon Ball, which is fine. That's his prerogative. Yeah. But that's why I am so metatextually fascinated in this. It would be like if instead of Resurrection F, they made Resurrection C, and it was the cooler movie. And it's like, why is Akira Toriyama making a cooler movie? Yeah. It's kind of like that. And it's just an interesting thing, because Dragon Ball is this giant, sprawling media universe. There's really nothing quite comparable to Dragon Ball in terms of just its sheer longevity and the amount of, hands that have been in the pot. But it also has this auteur voice at the center of it. And so going from one of those weird other arms of the media universe back to the core auteur voice is really interesting to me. Yeah,
I'm really curious to see what Broly is like. I think it would be hilarious if how Toriyama changed him is instead of him being obsessed with Goku, he's just obsessed with Vegeta. It's like the exact same thing. It's just like, here we go. It's just he just yells Vegeta all the time in a very angry voice. Yeah, I'm curious to see what they do with him. Honestly, actually, the thing I'm most interested in is how the Frieza stuff is going to get involved, because that's one of the more tantalizing hanging threads at the end of Dragon Ball Super is how Frieza's sort of half in play in a way that's very interesting. And so I'm curious to see, just all those little tiny elements that are at the end of Dragon Ball Super that, are clear for, new story stuff to pick up from. As a fan of that series, I'm very interested to see what they do with that.
So, Sean, we have talked about this off the air.
Yes.
I have not seen Dragon Ball Super yet.
No. You've seen, parts of the beginning, right?
I've seen all the Battle of Gods arc, and it was so awful, I really struggled to get through it.
Yeah.
And I need to just force myself to watch it, and I because I know I'm going to like it, because I've actually read the manga further than I've seen the anime, and I love it. Because the manga it did 2 chapters on Battle of Gods and then skipped to the tournament stuff.
Right.
And I love that. So I want to watch the whole thing. I think what we're going to have to do is before January, we're just going to have to do like 4 or 5 podcasts where, like, when I am done with an arc, we talk about it.
Yeah.
And we do a Dragon Ball Super catch-up, and I think that would be fun.
Yes, I am 100% down for that.
We might have to break that last arc in 2 because it's really long.
Yes, Tournament of Power. And there's, like, so much shit that happens that, it's...
So I'll let you pick, like, an arbitrary episode or non-arbitrary episode, and we'll do that. But, yeah, we'll have to do that. And I will not rewatch the Battle of Gods arc, but I will be happy to make fun of it.
Okay, sure.
And I'll rewatch the movie because the movie's fucking great.
Yeah, both.
And the anime version's horrible.
Yeah, that is something I need to do is rewatch those 2 movies because it's been a while. Yeah. One thing before we move on, one other element I just wanted to note is I am so excited to see how much money this like limited release is going to make over here because the Resurrection F movie basically broke every record for its kind of like special niche release that movie like that can have.
It's the highest grossing anime movie here that's not a Pokemon movie, I think. Like, or maybe like one of the Miyazaki ones from when they put those out in theaters.
Yeah, and it had like a weird limited release and all that kind of stuff. And this is post Dragon Ball Super, and Dragon Ball Super ends on such a ridiculous fucking high. Like, the hype coming out of the last couple of episodes of Dragon Ball Super was so huge, and you had, like, public screenings in a bunch of South American companies or countries that had to go through all this weird, the international receival of Dragon Ball Super only got more and more ridiculous to the point where you could, like, set your watch by Crunchyroll going down every time a Dragon Ball Super episode came out on Saturdays.
I mean, this is, and you know they're serious about that because we've never had this fast a turnaround of an international release. Never.
And so I think this movie's going to fucking sell like crazy.
Yep. Battle of Gods took a full year to come out over here. Resurrection F took, I think, 3-4 months, but felt more serious. Super took another full year. This is weeks.
Yeah.
Less than a month. And it's buy your tickets when they go on sale because Resurrection F sold out completely.
Yeah.
Okay, at least here in Denver. Denver's a big city. I assume it will sell out everywhere. And I'm going to be in Iowa, so I hope Iowa has Dragon Ball.
Everywhere has Dragon Ball.
Iowa will have Dragon Ball.
Everywhere has Dragon Ball.
If the college city of Iowa City does not get Dragon Ball Super the movie, somebody at one of those movie theaters is doing something wrong.
Yeah, no. I'm very excited.
I'm psyched.
Dragon Ball is good.
And we're also going to have to do our episode where we watch the 3 Broly movies and talk about them.
We need to at least do a Bio Broly episode. That has been waiting in the wings for years on this podcast.
I think Bio Broly is the only Dragon Ball movie I've only seen once. I saw it when I got the DVD way back in the day. I've only seen the dub, so I have probably a worse opinion of it than I would if I actually watched it in Japanese. But yeah.
I love that I've seen Bio Broly more than you. I've seen it twice. Because I saw the dub version forever ago, and then I rewatched it in Japanese when I just did my complete Dragon Ball watch through in Japanese this time.
I did tweet out, since I'm moving and I'm putting stuff in boxes, I did tweet out my entire Dragon Ball physical media collection, the pictures of it. Every time I have to go put that back in boxes, it feels crazier to me how much I have. Because that was only the DVDs.
Yeah.
One day I'll put them all on a shelf and share a picture of that because it's the most obsessive collection I have.
Yeah, it's probably unhealthy, but you need to just put like a post-it note or something on the top of that Bio Broly DVD so that it's like you can find it quickly when you're in Iowa. Because who knows when you need to break that bitch out.
I don't think I taped that box up yet because I knew I might need something from it. But yeah. Anyway, so yes, let's see. Last news thing, Sean. This isn't really news. It's just I wanted to play a fun game for a second.
Okay.
My favorite thing on Twitter this weekend has been a thing going around of, this was a guy on Twitter named Corey Taylor who asked the question, you can replace the cast of any movie with the Muppets, but you keep one of the human actors. What movie and which human do you keep? And Twitter is usually where I go to be sad. The last couple of days, because of this, I've gone there and laughed my ass off. So I just wanted to share the joy with everybody. My 3 answers so far were, I want Inherent Vice, the Paul Thomas Anderson movie where Joaquin Phoenix is the human and everyone else is the Muppet, and that scene with Catherine Waterston would be really fucking weird. I really want the Harry Potter movies, but where Maggie Smith is the only human. You got Kermit as Dumbledore, you got Gonzo as Ron, that sort of thing, and then Dame Maggie Smith is the one human. And my favorite one, and I'm sure I'm not the only person who said this, but I really want No Country for Old Men with Tommy Lee Jones as the only person, or Anton Chigurh as the only person, and I want Sam the Eagle to play the Tommy Lee Jones character.
No, yeah, I'm more with the No Country for Old Men. I want everybody to be human except for Tommy Lee Jones, who is the sole Muppet in the movie.
That'd be pretty good.
Yes, that would be good. Mine for this, I just want all 26 Zatoichi movies, with Zatoichi being the only human. And so it's just him walking into the blind samurai walking into a town just filled with Muppets, and there's some Yakuza bullshit going down, and he gets wrapped up in it and kills like 50 of them at the end of the movie and walks out at like in the dead of night because he can't stay on because he always has to move to another Muppet town to murder more of them.
Another Muppet town. My other answer is... Really, you can throw a dart at this. I want pretty much any movie with Michael Caine in it where Michael Caine is the only person because it worked really well with the Muppet Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
And so, The Dark Knight or something. And, Batman is Kermit in an outfit. Or no, I think Batman would be like Fozzie Bear or something.
Yes. And he has to, give his weird speeches. Christopher Nolan speeches to this Muppet, yeah.
So that one. Or Interstellar would also be a good one for this, where he gives the same speech 10 times. That would be very funny. But yeah, I really, any movie with Michael Caine, I'd be up for that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Any others?
I don't know. You didn't tell me.
I didn't tell you we were going to do this.
I was not prepared.
It was supposed to be a fun surprise segment
because
it really made my day. There have been a lot of good ones.
Yes, it is. That's Twitter is so often an indescribable force of evil in our society and in our culture. I mean, every once in a while, I can have a funny joke.
I'll go through some of the other ones that I thought were funny that people suggested. One of my favorites was Take the Graduate, and Dustin Hoffman can stay.
Yeah.
But now, Mrs. Robinson is Miss Piggy or something.
God, yes, that one's really good.
That one would be
That's
great.
a really good one. That fucking shot, but with Mrs. Piggy's leg, is very funny.
The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. They said keep Clint Eastwood. I think you could pick a lot of answers for Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah, I want 3 different versions of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly with all the different configurations of those characters.
Most people were picking good, classic movies. There are some bad movies here, do Twilight but keep Kristen Stewart.
Yes.
I think that'd be fucking great.
Yes. Okay, yes. I can see that one.
This would be good. Because this has been in the news lately, take any Mission Impossible movie. Tom Cruise is still there. Everyone else is a Muppet. It would not actually change the Mission Impossible movies that much.
Yeah.
And that's what would be fascinating with it. So yeah, I'm just reading down the list of some people who replied to that tweet. But yes, there have been so many. It has made me very happy. And yeah, we can keep this game going. Just imagine movies with Muppets. It's good.
I like Superman the movie with Superman being the only human.
Christopher Reeve would have been so good in a Muppet movie.
Yes, and I can just see him flying through the air with Miss Piggy on the date.
Yeah,
very good.
I'll say the other one that's been in my head is Criterion just announced a fucking insane Ingmar Bergman collection they're putting out in November.
That's like $300 or something.
It's $300 and it's 30 discs and it's almost every Ingmar Bergman movie. It's insane, and I'm going to see if I can scrap the change together for that because luckily I don't own any of the Ingmar Bergman Criterions, and that would be the way to do it. But it made me think of The Seventh Seal and Death is now the thing, the Grim Reaper from the Muppet Christmas Carol or something.
Okay, yes, yeah.
That'd be pretty good. Persona, not our Persona, but Ingmar Bergman's Persona with Muppets would be pretty great.
Also,
the Virgin Spring.
But what if it was our Persona and it was the 4 animated Persona 3 movies and the protagonist is the only human and everybody else is a 2D animated Muppet?
An anime Muppet.
Yes, an anime Muppet, yes.
That'd be good.
Yes, I want anime Kermit.
Okay. Which character is Kermit?
Oh, jeez. Would he be like Akihiko, maybe?
The thing is, it's a gender-bending thing, but in the cast, he's Mitsuru to me.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
If you're fine with the gender bending, then yes.
Kermit is Mitsuru.
Yeah.
Yes. I think there's a lot of good answers. I think Junpei would be Gonzo, and Rizzo would be Koromaru.
Okay, yes. I like Junpei as well.
All right, we're getting
Gonzo's
way
Junpei.
off topic.
Yes.
But I just wanted to have some fun. Let's move on, Sean. Let's talk about some stuff. You said you had a comic book thing.
Yes. We talked before the podcast to set up what we're going to do for our stuff, because you have a bigger thing to talk about.
I'm going to talk about Octopath Traveler in a minute.
Yes. But first, I have been digging myself into a very, very, very deep, cavernous Spider-Man hole. It's bad. I just read issues 100,
Oh my God.
101 of the Amazing Spider-Man run.
Weren't you only at like 38 last week?
No, I was like at like 70 something.
Oh, okay.
I was in the John Romita Sr.
Okay,
run.
well, we talked about Steve Ditko
Yes.
last week. Okay,
I'm
that's
basically
fine.
at the point where Stan Lee stops regularly writing Spider-Man comics, which is like he wrote Amazing Spider-Man basically every issue 1 to 100, which is one of the longest runs that any single writer has had on any comic book ever.
Yeah.
But like, so I've been reading a lot of Spider-Man stuff. I rewatched Spider-Man Homecoming. That's a fun movie. You know, I abandoned my quest of playing that Amazing Spider-Man 2 game while working out, because that game's bad. That's a bad video game. So instead I'm replaying Spider-Man Web of Shadows to keep every facet of my Spider-Man life alive, because I'm excited for that video game.
Yeah, we're going to have more Spider-Man announcements at the end of this show, actually.
Yes. There's a reason why I have not rewatched the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies yet, in my desperate Spider-Man quest that I'm currently on. But as a part of that, there was a Spider-Man spin-off that I have wanted to read, like literally since I was like 13 or 14 years old, and I've just never quite gotten around to it, because it comes from that mid-2000s. It's right around when Spider-Man 2 came out, is when this spin-off originally was released, and it always fascinated me, and that was back in the period where I was like regularly reading like modern Marvel comics until they fucked the Spider-Man continuity in the butt, and I was like, well, maybe this will culminate in me finally being able to get over that and read the Dan Slott Amazing Spider-Man stuff that everybody says is really fucking good, but I've just never been able to get over how they just screwed up all that continuity. It's just very frustrating. But anyways, and in that whole storm, there was this really great Spider-Man spin-off that came out that focused on Mary Jane as the main character, that started as 2 4-issue miniseries called Mary Jane and Mary Jane Homecoming, that then those sold really well in their trade paperback collected formats. So then Marvel greenlit what ended up being a 20-issue run of a comic book called Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane, which is maybe the best title for any comic book ever. And if you just look at the first cover for the issue number 1 of Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane, like that image was what like always fascinated me, because it's a teenage Mary Jane swinging on a web with Spider-Man holding onto her with the word Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane at the top. I saw that in a comic book store when I was like 13 or 14 years old. It was just like, what the hell is this? And kind of like flipped through it and didn't buy it at the time because I bought some other comic books.
That's a great cover.
Yes, it's a really good cover. The art's great. The guy, I think Miyazawa, who did the art, after he left that book, when that book ended, he went to Japan to work in manga, and then when he came back, he's now the guy that does the art on the Miss Marvel comics with Kamala, the Muslim Miss Marvel.
Oh, nice.
Yes, so his art is great, and yeah, he did the covers. So all that's really good and interesting, and I just, for whatever reason, I never got around to it that much. There was a long period in my life from like 19 to 20 to more recently that I just didn't really read comic books much at all. And then the Spider-Man thing happened, and now I'm like, well, fuck it, I'm going to buy these. And I just bought the digital versions because it was entirely on a whim. You can basically get all of it digitally off of Marvel's site. Obviously, also, you can get the physical versions off of Amazon, because these are pretty old, and so you're not going to find them in a comic book store probably. But what Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane is it's set in entirely its own continuity, so you don't need to worry about other Spider-Man stuff. And it's set in high school, and it's from Mary Jane's point of view, and it's basically like, it's very inspired by shoujo manga, so it's very much a like teen romance drama kind of story with Mary Jane at the center. Peter and Spider-Man aren't even really necessarily main characters until kind of deep into the Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane run. The first 8 issues, which are part of those miniseries that they kind of got off the ground with, barely feature Peter at all in them, and it's mostly Mary Jane at the center, then her 3 friends, Harry Osborn, who's like the rich kid, Flash Thompson, who's the star quarterback, and then his girlfriend, Liz Allen, who's the cheerleader, right? So if you know anything about, like, if you watch Spider-Man Homecoming and you like the high school drama of that, or if you like the high school drama in Ultimate Spider-Man, this comic book is basically like if you took the proportion of high school drama from those kinds of things in Spider-Man and the superhero stuff, and you flip those proportions, so it's like probably 80 to 85% high school drama and like 10, 15-ish% superhero action, because Spider-Man is a guest character in his own book, kind of. And that's maybe my favorite thing about the series is it has such an interesting perspective on Peter and Spider-Man, since they're not the main characters, since it's mostly about Mary Jane's life and her going through her everyday life. And the main way that Spider-Man gets involved is obviously Peter goes to that school, but Spider-Man, or Mary Jane has a huge crush on Spider-Man and kind of like an obsession with him. One of the first scenes in the first issue, which is a really great page of comic book, is her talking on the phone with Liz Allen and like doing something with this magazine, and you don't quite see what she's doing. At the end of the page, she puts up this picture of Spider-Man that she cut out of this magazine on the wall that's filled with Spider-Man pictures, like if he was like Justin Bieber or something like that, right? It's that kind of like high school teen girl crush that she has with Spider-Man. And then at the end of the first issue, she has this chance encounter with Spider-Man while he's fighting Electro, and then kind of she slowly develops this strange sort of like friendship with Spider-Man where they run into each other coincidentally a couple of times, and then eventually they have this fun thing where they kind of like, when one of them needs to vent about something, they meet on the like school rooftop or on some rooftop where Spider-Man sometimes shows up at her window, and he will complain about superhero shit that he's doing. It's mostly her complaining about like, you know, whatever weird romance love triangles going on in the high school stuff. And so they have this buddy-buddy relationship. And the most interesting thing about it is there is no point, like, diegetically within that comic book, they never explicitly make the connection between Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Peter is there, he's a character, he becomes a love interest for Mary Jane, he helps everybody study, he's a nerd, all that kind of stuff. Spider-Man swinging around, having fun Spider-Man stuff, and he has got this weird sort of like, you know, ask Spidey kind of like advice thing relationship he has with MJ. And you can definitely, you know, obviously it's assumed that you know, because who doesn't know that Peter Parker and Spider-Man are the same person? And there are some like kind of implicit connections of a couple of lines of dialogue that Spider-Man has in places you're like, oh, I kind of see that. You obviously, like, Peter Parker's always running off, but nobody has any idea why. And there's something so fascinating to me about the book never explicitly doing that. Like, you never see Spider-Man turn into Peter Parker. You never see Peter Parker's turn into Spider-Man. He never tells anybody. Nobody ever finds out. The book ended up getting sort of soft canceled at issue 20. It basically concludes with like there would be more stuff to do. The writer ended up going to DC to work on Teen Titans, which is obviously a much bigger, higher paying job. But since the book ended because the writer chose to leave, he ends up like leaving it on a pretty nice note. So it's like by the time of the book's conclusion, you know, there's nobody finds out that Spider-Man and Peter Parker are the same person. And there's something about that is so fascinating as a Spider-Man fan that there's no other superhero thing I know of that has that perspective. And so outside of that, the normal high school drama stuff is so entertaining. The art is constantly great. The writing is really sharp. It has a great pace to it. It's very addictive because every issue is constantly like ending on some sort of plot twist, some sort of character thing that happens that makes you really want to read the next issue. So I basically devoured the whole run of this comic book in 2 days. And yeah, like it's if you are a Spider-Man fan that has not read a lot of Spider-Man comics, I think this would be a really interesting one to pick up because it's not made like most American comic books are made, which is I think one of the reasons why it never got this huge following over here. But it is this really interesting like kind of cult classic that is mostly like underread and kind of undiscovered a bit over here. That is doing stuff that was like really ahead of its time in the American comic book industry, because this came out, this was like 2004 to like 2007 was its original run, and there was nothing on the market like it at the time.
I am looking at it right now, Sean. I've been looking at several pages while you've been talking. One, I want to read the fuck out of this.
It's so good.
It looks like a manga more than it does an American comic. I love it. And I love all the stuff you're describing of like it being kind of like a shoujo manga and stuff like that, because I can recognize in like one page, like, I see I see that.
Yeah, there is a plot thing development that happens like halfway through the series where Gwen Stacy transfers into the school. If that's how much you want to know, it's like a shoujo manga thing. You have straight up like a girl transfers into class and starts flirting with Peter, right? It does like the tropes and everything. It's great.
But here's my other big question about this, Sean.
Okay.
How the fuck is this not a TV show yet?
Right?
Like, literally,
yes.
like, because we live in an age where, like, people are constantly trying to figure out what weird comic book tie-in show can we make where the movie studio won't let us use the main hero, but we want to, like, be in the universe. So, like, Smallville was kind of a progenitor to this, where it is Clark Kent and everyone, but he couldn't be Superman on it. But, like, I think of, like, recently there's, like, that horrible Gotham show where it's about all the Batman villains, but they can never have Batman on it because DC will never let them use Batman. And, like, you know, obviously there's all the Marvel shows where they can never mention or use the Avengers, but it's in the Avengers universe. Freeform, which was ABC Family, is doing the Squirrel Girl show, which I'm actually very much looking forward to. But, like, things like this. How is this not a TV show? Because this is actually the only thing like this I've ever heard of where they have an actual perspective that would be worth telling, would be very easy to do. As you say, like, they might have a little bit of Spider-Man, but not so much that it would, like, disrupt the bigger universe.
Yeah.
Supergirl is another thing I was thinking of, where, like, you can have Supergirl, but they don't. In the second season, they started letting them use Superman, but, like,
but for that first season, it's like that guy, that
like,
your cousin's really
they
cool.
constantly say my cousin. Yeah, it's but yeah, like. This is such a good idea. How, like, Sony is flailing in every direction to figure out what weird-ass spin-off they can do. Like, let's do Venom, let's do...
Morbius the Living Vampire, who appears for the first time in Amazing Spider-Man comic books, I can tell you, in issue 101, which I did not remember.
All right. But yes, this, like... That sounds like a phenomenal idea for a TV show.
Yeah, and they've got the fucking perfect title. Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane is such a good title for that book.
It's a great title.
So good.
I'm gonna need to pick these up. These are this looks fantastic, Sean.
It's really good. Yeah, it's definitely that kind of like. I wish more American comic books kind of like went on a whim like this, and the big two did more experimental stuff like this book did with their cast of characters. And like the only way this book ever got made was one. You know, in the mid-2000s, you started having the manga boom over here, and specifically, like, a lot of, like, women reading manga that didn't have, like, never read American comic books. And so that was kind of, like, their, like, business strategy with, let's try to attract female readers, because American comic books typically are, the demographic skews widely male, for obvious reasons if you read a lot of American comic books. And so they did that, and then also this was right when the Raimi movies were at their height, and the Mary Jane in this book is clearly like inspired more from the Ultimate Spider-Man and Kirsten Dunst's movie Mary Jane. Than she's not like the weird like model like you hit the jackpot tiger character from the original comic books. She's more like sort of like average Jane kind of like.
She's also at the school with him. And,
yes, exactly. Yeah, so it's all that kind of stuff. So it was like the perfect storm to get this book made in the first place. It is kind of a miracle that we basically have 28 issues of it in the first place. But yeah, like you're right. Like a TV show version would be killer. Like they should just get the creative team back and do more of it because it's very good.
I'm just angry that there are like 6 seasons of Gotham and no seasons of Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane, and I haven't even read it yet.
Yep.
All right.
So that's my hot comic book recommendation. Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane. It's very good, and you can read the whole thing in like 2 days.
Well, I can't wait until you catch up to issue 700 and then go read the Superior Spider-Man and give us your thoughts on that.
I'll get there eventually.
Are you planning on doing all of it?
I don't know. Okay. I wasn't planning on going this far, Jonathan. That wasn't in the cards originally.
All right.
Originally, it was like, I'll probably read the Ditko stuff in a little bit. Maybe I'll get to like issue 50. When
How much do you have physically, like as books?
Because I'm reading my old omnibuses. I have up to like issue 130, consecutively. Because these are all like the copies that I read when I was like in 6th grade, right? When I originally read these. I don't know what I'm going to do when I hit that point.
Yeah.
It's obviously like reading comic books is very expensive. I'll figure something out. I don't know.
Theft.
Yes. Because I have like a bunch of Spider-Man comics that are intermittent between that point and about 2005, 2006.
Yeah.
So like it would still be extremely expensive, but it would be filling in the gaps.
It's weird. I wonder how much our local library has actually.
That is good, yeah.
Because you'd be surprised how I actually use them a lot. They have a lot more of that kind of stuff than I thought they would.
Yeah.
They're trying to attract the young people. All right. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on. I'm going to talk about Octopath Traveler, the best named game of 2018.
Yes, Octopath Traveler Loves Mary Jane.
That'd be a weird crossover, but hey.
Sure.
So Octopath Traveler is interesting. If you haven't been following, this is the big Switch exclusive for the month. This is from Square Enix. It is some of the main team that did the Bravely Default games on the 3DS.
Yeah, people might remember it from its original code name, Project Octopath Traveler. They changed it a lot when they put the game out.
Yes, they dropped the project, which is it makes sense, but also I loved Project Octopath Traveler because usually you don't just do project and then the title you're going to use. So yeah,
but they hit such a good code name that they're like, "Fuck it, let's just name the game Octopath Traveler." It doesn't. I mean, when you know what the game is, it makes sense. But when you hear the name on its own, it makes no sense.
It would be like if the Xbox One X had actually been called the Xbox Scorpio.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway. But yes, Project Octopath Traveler, Square Enix, the Bravely Default team, plus a new team at a game company called Acquire, I think, helped them on it. And it is, so the Square Enix's first big exclusive for the Nintendo Switch. It is a Switch exclusive. It's not coming to anything else. I mean, it could, I guess, but probably won't.
Yeah, I would be surprised.
Yeah. So anyway, and yeah, it is a game where you have 8 main protagonists, each with their own story. And the big pitch is both that element of it, that there are these 8 characters who, the first initial of their names, spell out Octopath. I don't know if you knew that, Sean.
No, I did not know that.
There they are. It's an anagram for Octopath.
That seems excessive.
It's... I just like it. Because that also tells me that they were always planning on calling it Octopath something. So, anyway.
There's almost like a better version of is if they had changed the name, but the character's name still spelled out Octopath, and like it's like people in the know.
Yeah. Like, even like when you go to the menu screen, you go to your journal, and it's like, look at the characters. It spells Octopath.
That's great.
It's awesome. So anyway, you have those 8 characters. The big draw, though, for this is what they call the HD 2D style, which is a fancy way of saying this is basically like a pixel art kind of game. It looks basically like a Super NES game, like Final Fantasy 4 or 6 or Chrono Trigger or something like that, but very heavily updated so that it is like 2D sprites in a 3D world that is also made out of pixel-based sprites.
Yeah.
It's super hard to explain unless you see it, and even looking at a video of it, I don't think does it justice, because I think this is one of the most beautiful fucking games I have ever played, and I actually wasn't sure how I felt about the art style until I played it. Like, you have to be there looking at it, interacting with the world. It is gorgeous, but that's a big part of it. So it is, in some ways, a throwback, which Square Enix is very much into right now. So, like, the Bravely Default games were effectively latter-day Final Fantasy sequels. Like, they were, like, if Final Fantasy had continued, like, a branching universe where Final Fantasy VII is not a steampunk game.
Right.
But, like, is...
But was a game about crystals?
A game about crystals set in some fantasy world,
yeah.
Right? Instead of being more like Final Fantasy has gotten more sort of sci-fi fantasy oriented with like future-based stuff rather than like fantasy, old-timey worlds. Bravely Default feels like what Final Fantasy like 13 would have been in that universe or something. And then they've got the Tokyo RPG Factory that's making games like Lost Sphere and I Am Setsuna, which is also based on effectively 90s console RPGs like Chrono Trigger and things like that. And now you have this, which is graphically very inspired by those Final Fantasy games. The director of the game even came out and said they wanted this to be the successor to Final Fantasy VI. That's not really what it is at all when you start playing it, and you should know that. I'll talk about that in a minute. But clearly this is part of Square Enix's whole push with this game. And so this game came out with a lot of hype because it kind of crosses a bunch of boxes for, I think, a bunch of different types of RPG fans, And it's also the first sort of big, original, exclusive JRPG for the Nintendo Switch.
Right.
People have been saying, like, oh, thank God the Switch finally has an RPG. That's a stupid thing to say. The Switch is overwhelmed with RPGs right now. It's just not all of them are, like, big new exclusives.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like... Did you all not lose your minds over, like, fucking Skyrim and Dragon Quest Builders and all this shit? Anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we've got Octopath Traveler. I was very excited for it, but also, like, kind of cautiously optimistic because I love some of these games Square Enix has been doing. I don't love others of them as much. Like, I loved Bravely Default, and I could not get into Bravely Second at all.
JRPGs, it's a very tempestuous sort of genre, right?
It is,
like,
yeah.
You can get a Persona, and it's like, this is like the most amazing game I've ever played, and then you get other ones that are just like, this is the biggest slog that any video game has ever provided.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure how to feel about this, and then the reviews came out, and if you've been following the reviews, they've been very polarized. Like, there have been some people who love it unabashedly, there are some people who are really, really lukewarm. I haven't necessarily seen anyone, like, hate it, but be, like, really lukewarm on it. Some people in the middle. And I'm here to tell you, I am in the love it unabashedly category. I fucking adore this game so far. I am about 8 hours in, 7.5 hours.
Yeah,
I
not quite
earlier.
8, yes.
Not quite 8.
7.5 Path Travelers, what you are.
And I am on my 6th of 8 Octopath Travelers. I'm getting the 6th character right now. My 6th, in this case, is Therion, the thief, who is cool, but I'm in the middle of his first chapter. the way the game works, this is something that should be said. It has an unusual structure. And this is, I think, the biggest sticking point for people. And I'll get to everything I love about it in a second. But this is the big sticking point, is the way it is played is it is not necessarily like one ongoing linear story with 8 characters, like a big party. It is 8 very fractal stories that you play kind of in any order you want, and the game sort of adjusts your leveling based on where you are. So basically you start and you pick one of the 8 characters, and it doesn't so much matter who you pick. That person does have to be in your party until the end of the game. They're basically your team leader, but other than that, you can still see literally all the other content in the game. You do not have to play the game 8 times. You can do it all at once. And you start and you do their first chapter, which is like their introduction, their first dungeon. You get that character. Then they head out into the world. And at that point, so the world map, so I think Kotaku said this and it was a good comparison. It's kind of laid out like an onion with layers. So like the innermost circle layer, if you go in that circle, you're going to effectively hit the other 7 towns where the other 7 characters are located. And when you get to one of those characters, you can recruit them into your party. You will play their first chapter. And then like the difficulty will scale so that when you do the dungeon component of their first chapter, like now you have 2 people and it's a little harder than it would be if you just had the 1. That's one of the, I think, impressive things about this game is the difficulty scaling, which has never really gone hand in hand with JRPGs before. So,
right.
But yeah, you have that, and then you have 2 characters, then you can go and get a third, and you don't have to go in any order. You can go find any of them. But the game very intentionally wants you to do this. You're not supposed to just pick your first character, do their first chapter, ignore the other 7, go to chapter 2, and then play their story linearly, because it really highly level gates you. It says chapter 2, you can go play it, but the recommended level is level 20, and you're not going to be level 20. I'm 8 hours in and I'm level 17, so I'm still not quite there yet. And I've got 6 characters. So they want you to get all 8 characters. And once you've done all 8 chapter 1s, then you can go out into the world, or further out into the world, and start doing the chapter 2s, and there's 8 chapter 2s, and I think there are 4 total chapters in the game.
Yes, because I read a couple of the reviews, and that sounds right to me. Yeah,
so 32 total chapters to play. Each chapter is sort of like a JRPG vignette, where you have a bit of a story centered around the town that the character is in. You learn about their problems, about their life, and then they have some task they have to complete. It involves, traditional JRPG, go out into the world, find the dungeon, go into the dungeon, beat the boss, come back to the town, that sort of thing. But the weird thing that I think has divided people over it is that it's not like the game heavily adjusts for which characters you have and puts them into the story. So my main character, my first was Tressa, who is the merchant, because JRPGs need more playable merchants, goddammit.
Yes. Reciteer is a very good video game. People should play Reciteer.
They never put it on Mac, so I've never played it.
No.
But one day maybe. Anyway, but yes. So I picked Tressa, and then I went out into the world and I got the Ulbrich, the kind of warrior dude, but it does not then have Tressa have a long conversation with Ulbrich where they put their hearts on the line and talk about all their issues. It really is when you're having a scene around Ulbrich, the other characters are not in the cutscene, and it's about them, and it's when you go back to traversal and battle mechanics that everyone is together. So it's not like they've made this heavily intertwined 8-part story. It's more what it's supposed to be is that these 8 people all have things they need to do out in the world, and you're together so you can help each other do them. And along the way, depending on where you are, the story is going to focus more on this person here, this person there. This has bothered some people a lot. Some people don't really mind. I actually think, and I'm only 8 hours in, I could amend my opinion on this. Famously, when I did the Grand Theft Auto 5 podcast, I said I really liked that game at first, and then I was probably one of the first people to hate that game.
That was my favorite split between 2 podcasts. Was one you were so over the moon on that game, and then the next podcast you hated it, and it was great.
My opinion, I think, has aged well over time. It felt silly at the time, but anyway. All right, but anyway, yeah. So who knows? So far, I actually like the narrative structure, and I think it's a couple of things. One, people get too up in arms about narrative in video games overall, I think. People apply, I think, too many literary and or cinematic standards to narrative in video games, and I'm okay with things being different. And also, a lot of the reviews that say, the narrative really bothers me, but it's got this amazing combat and amazing graphics and amazing music, but the narrative, it's okay, but the combat, graphics, and music are 90% of the game. So,
I'm sympathetic to that in the sense of, I've never played an RPG that I didn't like the story, but I enjoyed the game. That's just never happened to me.
I get it, but my one comparison would be this, though, on that, and I'll get back to what I was going to say.
Okay.
we both love like the original Final Fantasy, which has almost no story to speak of, and it's much more about kind of your own like fun headcanon of like, you know, you're going to kind of imagine yourself in this role and you're out on an adventure, and the only real narrative content is that there's 4 heroes and you got to go find the crystals and do fun stuff with the crystals, right?
Yeah.
Like that's pretty much it, and a lot of the mechanics in the world kind of let you just be in that world and kind of role play and let you put more of yourself into it.
Yeah, that game has a lot of empty space that either you don't fill it up and you don't like that game, or you fill that up and with your like own imagination and you like the game.
Yeah, I think Octopath Traveler also gives a lot of that space.
Okay.
And so, you know, and maybe that's partly, like, I'm not thinking so much of Final Fantasy VI when I'm playing this game, or Final Fantasy IV. I'm thinking way more of Final Fantasy 1 or 3 in my own mind when I'm looking at it. But anyway, so that's part of it, is just I think some people get too dragged down by that, but whatever. The other thing is that I actually think there's something really interesting about the structure, which is that because JRPGs are like 60 hours long and have to find a story that's going to drag you through that much time, there are very few small stakes JRPGs.
Yeah.
They are usually about the world is ending and we're going to find the doodads and then we're going to fight and kill a god. Right? Even our favorite games of all time, Persona, completely conform to that standard.
Oh, yes.
The world is under attack, we're going to find the doodads, and then we're going to kill the god. You know?
Yes.
Unless Octopath Traveler really takes an unexpected turn, this is not a game about finding and killing a god. You know? Like Tressa, my first character, she is a merchant from a family of merchants. She is like apprenticing to take over her father's shop when she has an encounter with a ship captain from another port town, and he comes in and she has this fun adventure with him and fighting some like bandits in the town, and then she realizes like, no, I want to do what this guy does. I want to go like see the world, and I want to tell my own story, and I just want to see what's out there. And that's Tressa. And, you know, Ulberich has one of the biggest stories, but even then, he is like a Ronin, you know, like a masterless, they don't use that word, but like a masterless knight, and he used to like protect this king, and then there was this war, and the king died, and someone who Ulberich thought was his friend did the deed and betrayed them, and he wants to go find this guy. And there is, one of my favorites is, I'm forgetting all the names. Cyrus is he's the like sage, like your magician character, but he is also a scholar. And you go to his town, and it's a town of like learning, and it's got a school and a library, and he's a professor there for the local like royalty. Like he tutors like the prince and princess, that sort of thing. And a book has gone missing, and he finds the stolen book, and then he realizes that there are more like books that are missing from the library, and he's kind of bored in this town, and he wants to go find those other stolen books. And it's things like that. Like even at its biggest, nobody's missions in this game are earth-shattering. None of their missions, again, unless they take a wild turn, which from what I've seen, I don't think they're going to.
They have to defeat the mighty octopus god at the center of the world. Yeah.
They're not going to like affect the shape of the nation you're in. It is about like these small tasks these individual people want to complete for their own individual reasons, and coming together as a group to go do that out in the world, because it's easier to do it with friends than it is to do it alone. And so what it feels like to me is kind of like having the JRPG equivalent of a short story collection or of a series of short films. There is this like vignette quality to it that I'm not going to say no JRPG has ever done that. Dragon Quest VII famously has a very like episodic vignette structure, for instance. And I think that actually can work quite well for a game this long.
Yeah.
But I really like that you get these little, like especially so far where I'm meeting everybody, people have like complained that this part of the game is too repetitive. But I love it. I love the structure of, I met my character, I did the dungeon, and I go out into the world, and then I kind of do it again. But now, instead of just, you know, furthering the story that is already in progress, that in most JRPGs, sometimes in the early going, has to be kind of fairly labored because there's so much to set up.
Yeah.
Now I'm meeting a new character, and I'm seeing a new culture, and I'm getting a new little taste of story, and in like an hour and a half, I've seen not a full story, but a good solid chapter of a person's story that had a beginning, middle, and ending, and now I move on to this next thing. Frankly, I think this is paced better than a lot of JRPGs I've played. Like, I think there's something really compelling about that structure of having it be sort of vignetted, episodic, almost like a good procedural TV show. And you go through it and you play it, and it kind of is constantly renewing and refreshing itself. And I find that really interesting. Because the other thing is, like, yes, there is repetition to the structure. And that you're going to go to a town and you're going to see the story content, and then you're going to go out and you're going to find a dungeon and you're going to kill a boss and you're going to move on. I guess my problem with that is, that's every JRPG in
Right.
this like traditional mold. Like that is like Final Fantasy IV is a fucking masterpiece. It does boil down to that basic thing. Like let's not pretend that like this is not one of the more repetitive genres. Like that's one of the magic things about the JRPG genre when it's firing on all cylinders is it's got a pretty small tool set to work with, actually, in terms of mechanics and things you do, and it's how you put those pieces together. I think Octopath Traveler lays bare some of the repetition more obviously than other games, but I think it uses it for interesting ends. And the most interesting thing about it, the best thing about it, is the presentation. It is a fucking gorgeous game. I mentioned the graphics earlier, that they are this HD 2D style. I can't get enough of it. My jaw is like constantly dropping at the sights in this game because there's really nothing that's ever looked quite like this. The closest analog I could come to try to like explain the effect of it is Paper Mario, where you have, you know, your paper cutout characters who move in this weird two-dimensional, three-dimensional plane, and then these like cutout three-dimensional graphics that look very like, you know, handcrafted and interesting to look at. It's like that, but with pixel art, like with the kind of very, again, Final Fantasy, you know, old school Squaresoft pixel art. And it's really just a wonder to behold. I've never seen anything quite like it. Obviously, you know, pixel art in video games has come back into vogue again with the indie game revolution. But what's interesting about Octopath Traveler is it's not an indie game. It's a fucking Square Enix game that had all the resources in the world behind it. And it is pretty interesting to see someone take those raw elements that a lot of people are working with right now, but with much fewer resources, and put the weight of Square Enix behind it.
Right.
Because what you get is something that I think about a lot, which is that, you know, when a certain like style goes out of fashion and then people stop doing it, you kind of wonder like, if it had continued though, what would it be like? You know, like pixel art in video games, you know, when it died out in the 90s in favor of 3D graphics, you know, I wasn't there for that.
Right.
You know, I was a little kid. But you always kind of wonder like, oh, but if that had stayed in vogue, what would it start feeling like? Or I often think, because I'm a film scholar, of like, if silent film continued as an art form onto today, what would modern silent films look like? Because they developed so fast in 30 years, what if they had 60 years to develop? And this kind of feels like, Octopath Traveler kind of feels to me like, if that had developed, this is where it would roughly be in the year 2018. And it's fascinating to me. If you like that kind of art style, this is a gorgeous game. And the best thing about it is the music. The music in Octopath Traveler is bar none one of the best video game soundtracks I have ever heard. If you asked me to make my top 10 video game soundtracks right now, I would probably save a place for Octopath Traveler. It is that good. It is that rich. Like every town has its own music. Every area has its own music. The battle theme has not changed yet, but my understanding is every chapter, like the 1s, the 2s, the 3s, the 4s, change the battle theme, which is crazy. JRPGs don't do that much.
Yeah.
It's very much in the ethos of something like Bravely Default or I Am Setsuna, in that it has some elements of like, I think the compositional kind of ethos of like an older Final Fantasy game, but with modern instrumentation. It definitely has a lot of I Am Setsuna in it, which you all know is one of my favorite soundtracks. Setsuna is a solo piano score, though. This is a lot of different instruments, but clearly performed live. I don't think it's a MIDI thing or anything, because it sounds very real. If it is, very, very high quality samples, which, you know, are becoming hard to discern anyway. Right. But yeah, it is. It's so gorgeous. It's the kind of thing where sometimes I just let my characters stand there and I listen to the music and I don't do anything, because I just want to hear that music. It is so good. It is haunting. It is beautiful. It is uplifting. It is exciting. It does so much for it. And if you're someone having trouble with the story, here's one recommendation I will make. Turn off the voice acting.
Okay, I didn't even know there was voice acting.
There is voice acting, and I don't think there should be. It's completely unnecessary. I played Tressa's chapter with voice acting, and then about halfway through Olberic's, I turned it off, because the English dub is terrible, because it's a Square Enix game, and if the literal fate of the world depended on Square Enix producing a good English dub, we would all be dead.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that is. I don't know how a company as big and with as many resources as Square Enix has not cracked this fucking code yet, but they haven't. Was Nier Automata a Square game?
It's Platinum. I don't know.
It's Square published, right?
I'm going to find out.
I think it was, because it was at their Square show this year.
Oh, yes, of course it was, yes.
Nier Automata is the one exception that has a good dub. Other than that, Square Enix could not produce a good dub to save their lives, so I'm not listening to the English voice acting, because it's like nails on a fucking chalkboard. I played it with Japanese, and the Japanese voice acting is great because they're all professionals and know what they're doing. But there's also the problem of the localization has often nothing to do with the Japanese.
Oh, right, yeah.
Not in like a Final Fantasy 15 way, but just enough that like they're sprucing it up and they're changing it. Honestly, it's a little more like an old Dragon Quest where like they very heavily like, because there's different like dialects and like, you know, period voices kind of throughout, and so they've chosen to do it very differently in English in places. It's not usually as bad as like they're completely on a different topic, but it was enough that there was like that jarringness to it.
Right.
And even then, when a voice would, it's not consistently voice acted, but when voices would come in, it didn't feel right with the presentation of the game. Like a pixel art game like this with a soundtrack as heavy and omnipresent as this one doesn't feel like that layer for voice acting exists. Kind of like if you took a silent movie and just started dubbing over Charlie Chaplin, but kept like the piano score in, it would sound fucking bizarre, right? Because that layer doesn't exist there. And
it's also like the presentational model of the graphics, like the graphical style is so abstracted.
Yes.
It's like that's why I was surprised when you even said voice acting was in the game at all, because it doesn't make sense to me in my head that like a pixel art game would even have voice acting, because like these aren't people, these are weird pixel things. Right?
Exactly. And as the moment I turned the voice acting off, I knew I had made the right choice. It feels so much more natural. It gives you so much more space to just be in the game and soak in the visuals and the atmosphere and the music and appreciate what I think is actually very good writing at times. But that, I will say, to a person, every review I read that complained about the story complained about the voice acting. And that, like, the writing is bad. I don't think the writing is that bad. I actually think it's often very, very good. And I'm going to read you some examples in a second here. But the English voice acting, I can understand why that would be like nails on a chalkboard. Turn it off. This game doesn't need it. I think if you went back and took like Final Fantasy IV and just started voice acting over it, yes, you would say, oh, this game's horribly written. No, it's not. It's actually very well written, but it's not written for that thing.
It's like when they put voice acting into Castlevania with Symphony of the Night, and it was like, you know, the original voice acting performances were terrible and like classically so, but then when they did like the remade version of it with the Dracula X stuff, they did a redone version of the voice acting that was like totally fine voice acting, but it was like, this is weird. Like, there's no, like, this is, again, like, the art is so abstracted. Human voices shouldn't be coming out of these characters. It's bizarre.
Yeah. Turn the voice acting off. You will enjoy the game more. It feels like how it's meant to be played, because that's the kind of game it is. It just shouldn't have voice acting. They would have been, I think, wise to just save the money and not do it. It's fine without it. I like it very much this way.
If Legend of Zelda games still don't need, like, full voice acting, there's no reason to have like a 16-bit inspired RPG to have it, right?
Again, I think something that really hit me when I started just paying attention to it without the voice acting is that, as in an old school JRPG, the music and the visuals and the specific atmospheric things they're doing are carrying a lot more of this adventure than a traditional forward momentum narrative is. You know, like that is the dominant form of storytelling in a game these days, is that story is the key thing at the center of the game, and it's going to push you forward, and there's always going to be things happening, and atmosphere is there, but sometimes it's secondary. That's not the case with this kind of game. So I think it also just helps recalibrate maybe expectations of what this is and isn't. So turn off the voice acting, enjoy the incredible music, which, for instance, on the Ophelia's chapter, she is this cleric at the religious center of this world, which is about a sacred flame. They keep saying sacred flame, and I'm thinking of Doctor Who. So there you go.
Okay, yes.
There's also a million.
Yeah, it's like also Witcher 3 Sacred Flame bullshit.
Yes. Anyway,
she's probably a racist. You just don't know yet.
But Ophelia's story, like, I found her, you know, hour-long chapter 1 really powerfully emotional, and it's less like these specific things happening on screen, like in terms of story and character, than it is the visual atmosphere of this very snowy world she lives in, the incredible music, which is very much feels like an I Am Setsuna kind of thing. And it moved me a lot. And I love this game. I really do. I haven't talked about the combat yet. Maybe I'll talk about that more next time. The combat is fantastic. That this team that did Bravely Default and now this have such an amazing handle on how to do good JRPG, like deep, interesting, accessible JRPG combat in a way that I think truly is moving the genre forward in interesting ways. I said this on Twitter the other day. There's nothing I want more in games right now than Square Enix needs to just put these people on the next Final Fantasy. Mm-hmm. They're not going to do that because Final Fantasy needs to be big budget and 3D and all that stuff. I want a little old school 2D Final Fantasy done by these guys. because I think they have a much better handle on what this genre is at its heart than modern Final Fantasy teams have, and that would be fascinating to me. But either way, I love that Square is still giving them the space to do these experiments. Because, the combat is an evolution of the Bravely Default system. It has something like the Brave Default system in it, but I think simplified and improved in a lot of ways. It has an elemental system, but not quite like any other game I've played, so it is addictive to play on that level. I love exploring the environments. I love listening to the music. I really like the stories I'm seeing so far. This is one of my favorite games I've played this year. I fucking love this game.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see if that enthusiasm keeps up, because the stuff from the reviews I read, it felt like a lot of the split was people hitting this tedium of the formula of the game.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see if that's going to be an issue for you or not.
I'm interested in that too. I'm into it so much right now, and I'm seeing the format so far as a feature, not a bug, that I would be surprised if I come down on that side.
But you haven't hit chapter 2 yet,
no.
Right?
But the other thing also is I'm not playing this 12 hours a day to review it by Friday.
That's a good point,
This is not a game you're supposed to binge. Very clearly, when you're done with a chapter, you should put it down and go do something else. The most I've done so far is 2 chapters a day, and I don't think I'm going to do more than that, because it feels like it's something you savor, not something you indulge in. And that's fine. Some games are not meant to be played in a 5-day review period, So I'm curious to see where I come down on it, but I'm really loving this so far, and I kind of want to go back and play more of it. But I do have my Switch on me.
Yes.
Just so I want to read you a little bit, Sean.
Okay.
I took some screen caps of this. First, I'm going to do a line of dialogue that I just loved so much, I want to verbalize it on the show. So let's see here. Got my album up. So this is a part of the story where this is Cyrus's story, and he is confronting a guy who has stolen from a sleeping guard. And this is such an amazing line of dialogue, Sean. He says, "Keeping up on our friend's somnolence, are we, old chum?"
That is the second time I've encountered that word today.
Somnolence?
They use that word in Amazing Spider-Man issue 101 when they introduce Morbius the Living Vampire.
And as there, it is not a word that's meant to be read out loud.
No, yes, it's a weird, it's a strange word. It's a fun word. It's a good word.
Anyway, I just loved that. It's a great line. And it's a lot of this game very much feels like Dragon Quest 1 in that way, where they decided to have fun with the old Shakespearean language in places. Cyrus less so. It's the I forget which character it is, really has a heavily old English style thing there. Alright, the other thing is Cyrus, the same character, can do this thing where he can scan NPCs in the world and learn about them, and it'll bring up this little profile of that person based on what he has discerned about them. And some of these profiles are so well written, it's become one of my favorite things to do in this game is read about people. So here's one. It's a 65-year-old woman, it tells us, and it says, "Once upon a time, a girl vowed to write her name in legend as a bandit queen. Yet dreams have a way of changing and fading with time. And so it was that a woman grown, a vagabond who had stumbled from town to town, leaving chaos in her wake, eventually settled down with the one man bold enough to steal her heart."
Okay.
And people are saying this is poorly written. That's an amazing paragraph.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
There is a part in the thief character's chapter, Therion, where you are outside a mansion and there are 3 guard dogs. And to my surprise, you can scan the guard dogs, and each of them has their own profile, Sean.
Okay.
This is amazing. This is what I wanted to read on the podcast. All right, first dog. "One might describe this dog from Everhold as the embodiment of canine virtue, given the unbridled devotion he has for his master. Woe betide the fiend foolish enough to harm those he adores, for he will fall upon that villain with great vengeance and furious anger."
Okay, yeah.
It's the best canine dating profile ever. Okay, this one. "The lone lady of the lot, this dog left behind her home of Grandport. Not a moment passes that she does not think of her beloved, whom she yearns desperately to see again, but until that promised day comes, she will carry out her duties faithfully." So a little dog love affair there.
Yeah.
And finally, "Not all dogs have it in them to charge fearlessly into battle and risk life and limb. This one bears no great love towards his master, and would like nothing more than to quit this place and return to his home of Victor's Hollow."
Nice.
That is one of the things that, okay, they fully gave me a, character profile of the 3 guard dogs outside this mansion that I will otherwise not be interacting with. I love this game.
Yeah, that is like a much better executed version of a thing that the Dishonored games did, where you had like this heart thing that would tell you whether people were like bad or good, and it would give you this like a couple of lines of dialogue. But it was usually like this guy is a guard and he's a nice dude.
Yeah.
This guy is a guard and he murdered somebody. So you can kill them, it's fine. It's okay to murder people that aren't nice.
I picked those 4 because those are some of the best examples, but they're all like that. Like, they're hilariously in-depth. Like, some dude at Square just spent a year coming up with stories about random NPCs and clearly had a lot of fun doing it. I can't wait to see what else there is.
Yes.
Anyway.
There's one point of order I want to raise about the writing of this game and the way that people have talked about it. And you did this just a little bit ago, but I let you continue.
What did I do?
Is there is no Old English in this game. There is not.
Okay, now not literal Old English.
But I have seen people say that, and it is, as someone who is going to be an English teacher, they will not let me be an English teacher if I don't just no, Old English is a very specific thing. If there's Old English in this game, you would not be able to understand it.
This is like saying classical music to refer to Beethoven or something when classical actually refers to something else. Like, we know what we're talking about.
I'm not a music teacher. Okay. That is not my domain, right? This is all the slightly flowery English is all basically Elizabethan.
Okay, it's Elizabethan style language.
Yes, some of it is. And
let me go with this Elizabethan tinged language.
Sure, yes.
Is that better, Sean? Is that the most accurate I think I can be?
Because I also, and this is like one of the things that sort of like set me off, is like one, like Jason Schreier specifically calls it Old English in his Kotaku review, is just like, if you're putting, like, it's fine in conversation, like I don't actually care that much, but if you're writing a review, somebody should have caught that. And then also I've just seen people, because some people have been comparing it structurally in some ways, which I don't think the comparison is that strong, but they've been invoking the Canterbury Tales just in terms of we have a bunch of different characters that all kind of have their own story, but structurally it seems like very, very, very different. But because of that, someone I saw like in a comment was even like, oh, but you see, like even like the language is like Middle English. It's like, that's not even fucking, again, if it was Middle English, you'd barely be able to fucking read it, guys. Like, these are specific terms that mean specific things.
Yes.
It's not Old English, it's not Middle English, it's vaguely Elizabethan.
Would you play a Canterbury Tales video game where they turned each chapter in the book to a chapter in a video game?
Yes. I would at least,
would it be better or worse than the book?
I mean, the book is it's one of the best pieces of English language literature, but it is a very difficult thing to grapple with. I would like it because I would like there to be a competitor in the video game classic literature space occupied almost exclusively by Dynasty Warriors right now. And I would like there to be something else in there, and Canterbury Tales is as good a game to go to, or a work of literature to go to as any.
See, this is the thing. Now I just want Canterbury Tales, but it's a Muso game.
Yes, 100% I would play that, and they're all just like on their fucking like trip to Canterbury and just telling stories about how they slaughtered millions of people in the battle a couple of weeks ago.
All right, let's move on.
Wife of Bath would be so good in a Muso game.
All right, Sean, let's talk Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. All right, so Sean, I'll let you kick this off.
Okay.
I mean, we all know Return of the Jedi, the last Star Wars movie, the third released. We're talking about it 6, blah, blah, blah. We've done all the movies up to now. We're going to talk about Episode 6 today. We have, I think, maybe appreciated these movies even more along the way as we've done each of these. At least that's been my experience. And I did in all sorts of ways with Return of the Jedi. What is your kind of opening statement on this film?
Oh man, it's my opening statement is that this is like a really, really strange movie, structurally speaking. Like the way it goes about telling its story, the way it like is a sequel to Empire Strikes Back, like the way it like sort of understands itself in that way, the fact that its opening scene or like sequence is basically 36 minutes long, roughly speaking, all the Jabba stuff, which is great, but it's so long, and then you get to Endor, the forest moon of Endor, very specific. It's not called Endor. Endor is a planet. It's the forest moon of the planet of Endor.
And apparently they never gave it a name because they have to say Forest Moon of Endor in full every time.
Yeah, I never quite understood that choice. Yeah, but you get there and you hit the Ewok stuff, and we don't need to like relitigate the Ewok issue in the annals of Star Warsdom, but that movie grinds to a fucking halt. There's a couple of things. I had a revelation this time watching of a thing I never thought about, never noticed before, because this movie is so ingrained in, like, you know, I don't remember a time in my life when I hadn't seen Return of the Jedi yet. You know, it's one of those kinds of movies.
Same here.
So I have so many assumptions going into it, and it's so what it is. And I guess I kind of had, like, one, like, revelation that I had a while ago that I sort of, like, brought up in my mind again, which is, why does Leia have to be Luke's sister? Why is that actually an important thing for this movie? Which is, like, that's an interesting thing. Obviously, we could talk about the Han Solo thing. But the one key thing about the Endor stuff that I realize is so missing, what relationship is there between the Ewoks and the Empire?
The Empire doesn't know about the Ewoks.
Yeah, there's nothing going on there. And so it's just this, I just had this realization, like, why are the Ewoks fighting the Empire? And I realized the movie doesn't actually provide, like, a narrative justification or motivation for that at all.
Other than the Empire is fighting their new friends, and so they're going to help their friends, I guess.
Yes, but, like, the Empire are leaving the Ewoks alone. They have no idea that the Ewoks exist. The Ewoks are just hanging out, like, having, like, weird teddy bear orgies or whatever the Ewoks do, you know? And there's nothing going on there. So it's like, it's that kind of movie. It's that kind of movie where there are just these moments where it's like, why is this like this? And it's very difficult in those moments to come up with an explanation of what was the, like, storytelling motivation behind these choices. And it's so bizarre because on the flip side, you have some of the most, like, sharply written, sharply performed, like, most incredible moments in all the Star Wars movies, which is specifically the best part is, obviously, we've talked about it before on this podcast in a lot of different scenarios, is the Luke Emperor Vader sequence on the Death Star 2 is so perfect. Every time I watch it, I'm always amazed by it. Just every element of it, from the performances and the writing and the music and the way it's shot and the choreography. And everything is so perfect, and it's such an incredible culmination of the themes of Star Wars. It also, watching it in this sequence with, like, kind of keeping the prequels in mind, I find, like, the prequels actually enhance a lot of that stuff and stuff in Return of the Jedi tremendously. And so it is a movie that is split, you know? It is a movie that has maybe not even quite a half of it, but, like, almost half of it or something is so incredible, and then but is stitched together by the most, like, poorly thought through, just, like, strange bits of storytelling I've seen in the movie.
Yeah, so my opening statement was what I said earlier, the Schrödinger Star Wars thing. I know I'm slightly misusing the Schrödinger's cat thing, but the idea of, like, two
I'm
things...
not a science teacher, so I'll allow it.
Okay, but the two things, like, inhabiting the same space, but they shouldn't be, you know? Like, that's it for me, is that, like, it kind of feels like you're going in and out of parallel dimensions. One where Return of the Jedi is the best Star Wars movie and everyone agrees, and one where it's the worst and everyone agrees, and they are, like, inhabiting the same plane. Because I think when Return of the Jedi is on, it's on like no other Star Wars movie is on.
Like Donkey Kong.
Oh, man.
Somewhat contemporary reference for when this movie came out.
All right. Anyway, yes. So it is... What was I saying? Okay, it's very good. So, like, I think all the Jabba stuff, that is as good a start to a movie, especially like a big, like, summer blockbuster kind of thing, as I've ever seen. It is such a great reintroduction to the world, coming back to these characters. It is just such a precisely laid out sequence. It is weird, and I love it. It looks like a fucking Jim Henson movie, and I adore it.
It's like they just stumbled onto the set of, like, Dark Crystal.
Yep, no, completely. It's that or Labyrinth. I expect David Bowie to show up at any moment. Oh man, now I'm imagining a world where Bowie is Jabba the Hutt. Like, Jabba isn't a weird alien, he's David Bowie, which would also be a weird alien. Yeah. Anyway, but yes, so you have all of that. And then, but because of that, and that is, I had forgotten that is a full 37 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, it is so long. It's really great, but it's something where you end up wondering if it was the right choice for the movie for it to be as long as it is.
Because here's the thing, like, if you want to assign a traditional Hollywood 3-act structure to Return of the Jedi, it is there, but you have to ignore the first 37 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, because that's not in the... Like, that is its own movie. It has a beginning, middle, end with, like, its own goal and revelations and even character development in some ways with, like, how Luke is introduced and comes through in that sequence. And then it's first act, let's lay everything out. Second act, mounting tension on Endor. Third act, payoff. It's rough, but, like, it's there. It's just there starting 37 minutes in, and then it's like a 90-minute movie. Yeah. So it's kind of two movies stitched together. But yeah, so that stuff is fantastic. I think everything involving Luke Skywalker in this movie is as good, not just good, it is as good as it could possibly be. I don't think there is literally a way you could improve the scenes with him, Vader, and the Emperor. Not even a tiny thing I could identify that is not just not wrong, but could be improved in any way. It is so good. It even trickles down to, I completely understand what you mean about Leia being Luke's sister. The scene where Luke tells Leia that is one of the best Star Wars scenes. It is unbelievably well written and acted and scored and shot. It's beautiful. The scene where Yoda dies could not be any better. It's incredible, including another scene of Frank Oz and company showing off by having Yoda full-bodied with his feet out. When this movie is good, it is as good as Star Wars has ever been or it will ever be, period. When it is bad, though, it's as bad as Star Wars can get, I think. Because there is that middle section, basically the late first act stuff with the Ewoks, that, I don't have a problem with the Ewoks themselves as, creatures.
No, yeah.
But where the plot goes with it, I mean, good God, it's 30 minutes of the most plotting nonsense. And when you're on to the entire thing of C-3PO being mistaken for a god and having to help everyone out and blah, blah, blah. That is, people complain about Jar Jar Binks, they're fucking insane. That is way more annoying and cloying and kid-friendly than any of the Jar Jar stuff in Episode 1, to me. Because it goes on forever.
And it has no purpose. At least Jar Jar is just, in the main group of characters on the plot, right? It's this is just this, weird plot detour that is nothing.
Yeah. That's weird. I think this movie goes up and down a lot with whether it knows what to do with Carrie Fisher. She is great, and she definitely has some highlight moments. Obviously, Carrie Fisher owns it, even when they are putting her in an embarrassing metal bikini, and that we can talk about that. She's great, but that character's up and down. And this is something I really want to dive into with you, Sean, is I don't know if I could point out a major blockbuster franchise movie that misuses a character as poorly as Return of the Jedi misuses Han Solo.
Yeah.
I think as well as Han Solo is used in Empire Strikes Back, that is as poorly as he is used in this film. I think he is good in the first half hour at Jabba's place, where he has one of my favorite Han Solo lines of, gone for a couple months and everyone's got delusions of grandeur. That's fantastic, and that's the only moment in the movie he feels like Han Solo. The rest of it, they have nothing for him to do. They have no character arc. They have no real agency in the narrative for him. And Harrison Ford is bored to be there. He's not quite Jennifer Lawrence in X-Men Apocalypse bored to be there.
Right.
But he is really bored to be there. He's
at least they didn't have to cover him in blue makeup. He got to show up and put on a costume and swag around for a little bit.
Yeah, I don't blame Jennifer Lawrence. She has, she has to be slathered in blue paint and then have to pretend to be excited. That's bad. Yeah, he just gets to swagger around. But yeah, they have no idea what to do with him. And yet, when it all comes together in that third act, and it is all the action on Endor, and it is all the action on the Death Star with Luke, Vader, and the Emperor, and it's all the action with Lando and the fleet in space, it is grand, it is operatic, it is beautiful, it is the ending Star Wars deserved.
Yeah.
It is a beautiful finale to this series. And I come out of it loving this movie. I love Return of the Jedi, and I don't think I even have a choice in that. It's been in my life forever.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
I love Return of the Jedi. But it is such a weird movie, because I don't think I can point to a movie that I know as well as Return of the Jedi, at least, that has such a massive delta between its best and worst things.
Yeah.
And yet is still a good movie in the end. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's any way to say that, Return of the Jedi is a bad movie. But
no, because, the stuff that it's really good at is the Luke Skywalker stuff.
It's the most important
luckily,
stuff.
that's the most important stuff. It's the majority, the majority and the backbone of the movie is what, the movie is hinging on that stuff. So it's if the Luke Skywalker stuff was great, but it was just, in the periphery, and, the Han Solo story was really what they put as, the backbone of the film, it would crumble to pieces. Luckily, they didn't do that.
No. So, let's actually start with Han Solo, Sean.
Okay.
Because I'm so fascinated in this. I mean, one of the things you talked about with, some of the messiness in the scripting in the middle of the film, a lot of that comes from the fact that, in the 3 years between Empire coming out and Return of the Jedi coming out, when George Lucas and Lawrence Kasdan and Richard Marquand and everyone were working on this film, there was a ton of disagreement about what this movie was going to be.
Yeah.
Famously, George Lucas waffled a lot on whether or not this was going to be the last Star Wars movie. Like, we now look at it like, oh, of course, it's the end of the trilogy. It was always going to be a trilogy. That was never the intention.
Yeah.
Like, George Lucas has even gone back and tried to retcon this, like in the documentaries. Like, it was always 3 movies. I had one script and I cut it in 3, and that's complete bullshit, George. Yeah. What it was is they made one movie, and then another movie, and the intention was like Star Wars was going to keep going and going because it was making all the money in the world. They never had a clear intent of how much they were going to wrap up in Return of the Jedi. Like, do we just wrap up the Vader stuff, but we like open up a new course of story? Do we really put an ending on it? And I actually think when you watch the finished film, the theatrical version, like the original non-special edition version, it doesn't necessarily feel like it has to be the last movie.
Sure, yeah.
In that form. Like, you definitely could tell more stories. Like, it has wrapped up Luke's story very conclusively, but it does not. It does, unlike the special edition, it does not cut to the rest of the galaxy and make it feel like the grand 6-film thing is over and finished.
Right.
But yeah, it was basically during production when George Lucas decided that this was going to be it, because he was going through a messy divorce and he was under a lot of stress and emotional strain, and he decided he needed to walk away from Star Wars and do other things with his life. He had custody of his kids and he was worried about being a father. So, all these things happened, and so Return of the Jedi was probably the most slapdash of the movies in terms of getting it to that place. But there was also a lot of disagreement on certain things that should or shouldn't happen in the movie, and the most famous is Harrison Ford and Lawrence Kasdan really wanted to kill Han Solo. Harrison Ford had Raiders of the Lost Ark came out after Empire. It was 1981. So he was now on top of the world as Harrison Ford. He had a new franchise with a lot of these same people. Lawrence Kasdan wrote Raiders of the Lost Ark. And he thought, and also, again, thinking that this might not be the last Star Wars movie, Harrison Ford wanted out. Very much like he would 30 years later with Episode 7. He said, I think I should die in the first act, and that'll give the heroes motivation and create a sense of dread for the rest of the movie. Kasdan agreed with him. George Lucas vehemently disagreed, and Lucas ultimately won that argument. And you can actually see the split, I think, in the movie. That there's a lot that Harrison Ford and the character are doing in the first 30 minutes, and then he's got nothing for the rest of the film. Do you think they made the right choice?
No.
Do you think Han Solo should have died in this film?
Yes, or he's never really revived. It's one of the two, right? It's either you kill him off. Because I can see the argument of, it is Star Wars, and there's something that, I think in the moment it is hard. It's so hard to think of, what if they killed Han Solo in Return of the Jedi?
Because this is my thing about it, is that I'm so conflicted because the counterfactual is impossible for me to imagine.
Exactly.
Because if Han Solo died, it wouldn't be Return of the Jedi, because Return of the Jedi would have to have a dramatically different tone.
Yes.
The tone of the rest of the movie would have to be much more in line with the tone of the Luke Skywalker scenes. And I could see that. That would be a much more tonally consistent sequel to Empire Strikes Back. This is not that at all. This is tonally very different than the first 2 movies. But George Lucas didn't want to make that, clearly, because this is this has as much, kid pandering as any Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
Maybe Episode 1 would be on par, but, this is pitching at a slightly different audience than the second one.
Yeah. One of the other things that makes it hard to imagine is, because, I think if you were to kill Han Solo, so much about this movie would have to be different. You can't spend 30 minutes getting Han Solo back and kill him.
No.
You just can't. And so, the entire opening of the movie would have to be completely different. And that's one of the things that makes it hard for me to imagine, because it was something that I used to very much be in this, of course they should have killed Han Solo in Return of the Jedi. And then when I'm watching it this time and thinking about it, it's I don't know how I would write that. Because it's hard to imagine you bringing the character back at the beginning of the movie and then finding a spot to kill him, especially if you have the characters dispersed. You can only kind of kill him at the beginning of the movie. It's kind of the only time when any of the people are the whole gang is together. It's you can't kill him in the third act because Luke's dealing with the Emperor and Darth Vader, and Luke has to be there or be cognizant of it when Han Solo dies, and there has to be enough focus on it, right? So it's the movie that exists. I think there's not a great space to kill off Han Solo, but they also didn't commit to giving Han Solo a big presence and a character arc in the movie. So it's it's this weird wishy-washy thing of he kind of might as well not be in the movie for most of it, but also it's Han Solo and it's he needs to have some sort of finality.
Here's where I think I come down on it. I think George Lucas was right that they shouldn't have killed Han Solo. I really do, because I get to the end of the film and there's that, I love the ending sequence. The original or the special edition. Pick your John Williams song.
Yeah.
They're both great. And everyone's together and celebrating. And Han and Lando hug. And then they see Luke and they hug. And you have that great last shot of them all together. And it would feel so profoundly different to me to not have Harrison Ford in that shot that I don't even want to imagine that world. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's the end result that I'm thinking of here. I don't think he should have been killed. But clearly they needed to do something with him differently in the rest of the movie. So I guess that's where I come down on it. Is should or shouldn't he have died is kind of less important to me than did they make good use of the character? And they did not. And I think you could have. I don't think it's impossible. It would be difficult in places because, like, Lando is, like, honestly what you would do with it is you need Han Solo or the Millennium Falcon in this movie. If you're going to use him that way, like, I don't know how you would disperse this in different ways, like which characters would be where, because I also don't want to have Lando out of the movie, but, like, it is weird that all the Millennium Falcon action in this movie does not have Han Solo or Chewie in it, you know? So yeah, I don't know, but I do I don't think George Lucas's instinct was wrong.
I agree, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is something where it's like, but it's like, it's the problem with the whole movie is, like, basically everything they do with, like, the boots on the ground indoor stuff, I think is, like, forest native indoor stuff is horribly misaligned. Like, it's just, like, not, it feels like placeholder movie. There's something about it that is just, like, because when you think about it, like, so little happens in this movie compared to the first Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, where there's, like, a lot of going on, you're going to a lot of different places. In this movie, I think largely because the opening is this huge, like, really well done, but, like, very big prologue that has very little to do with the main plot of the film, which is them going to the Forest Moon of Endor and doing, like, the joint strike on the shield generator and the Death Star 2. Like, that's what the movie is. And so there's something about, like, there's not a lot of things that actually happen in that dynamic of the ground assault and the like space battle. Like, that side of the movie feels like very perfunctory, and all of the attention is on Luke and what Luke is doing, and all the emotion and all the character arcs and all the writing has to do with that stuff. But everything else has to be going on also. And they just never found a way to sort of, like, create some sort of overriding theme or something to unify everything.
Well, because it's clear even at the end. Like, how it's edited is Luke is your focal thing.
Yeah.
And everything else is happening as a function of Luke's arc. And I don't think that's wrong in how you lay it out. Because when, like, Luke is looking out the window and sees the fleet being destroyed by, you know, the Emperor, like, that is important. That, like, the Emperor has manipulated all of this and that it ultimately all comes back to Luke. Like, that's part of why I think all the Luke, Emperor, Vader stuff has so much weight, is that there are these other things going on in the universe that are so clearly tied. Like, I do think the third act has a genuinely amazing sense of editing and geometry and geography to it, of these three different planes of action coming together. I think it's extraordinarily well done. But there is that, like, have they fully gotten the Forest Moon of Endor into that position by the time we get there? Have they fully earned the Lando and the Rebel Alliance thing there? No, as you say, there needs to be, like, some kind of thematic thing going on with those characters on those threads to put it together, because this movie is no less diffuse than Empire Strikes Back is,
right,
in terms of the different kind of structure going on. But Empire Strikes Back is moving on this very clear thematic axis where everything is moving in tandem, and when you cut to Han Solo and Leia, it doesn't feel like it's less important. It's just a different play on the same overall set of themes.
Yeah. Like, honestly, one of the things, another Star Wars movie that this thing reminds me of in Return of the Jedi is actually The Last Jedi. Where The Last Jedi, one of the things I don't like about that movie, I think it's a good movie overall, but one thing that always feels weird to me about that film is how so much of that film is focused on this one very specific scenario of the ship. And it's like, there's something about Star Wars that suggests a certain grandeur and a, like, journey and, like, a bigger sort of, like, mythological quality to it that demands there to be this time and this adventure, that when you have so much focused in, like, a very small set of locations, it makes the movie feel small. Even when what is happening in the Return of the Jedi is technically huge scale and it's very impressive, like, from a storytelling perspective, it feels like we have spent no time here. Like, it's just like there's like 2 days or something happens over the course of Return of the Jedi, whereas in Empire Strikes Back it feels like several weeks or something passes of like between all these different storylines being told and Luke training and Han and Leia on the run, and there's a lot of time that feels like you're spending and a lot of adventure that happens. In Return of the Jedi, there's just no sense of that. Partially because I think the opening and the rest of the movie is so divorced from one another.
Yeah, I mean, it's especially when you start talking about it critically, it feels like two movies.
Yes,
like it's a great Star Wars double feature they give you, but it's not necessarily one cohesive unit. Yeah, it is a very strange structure for a film, and I do wonder how much of this comes from, waffling during production of not quite knowing what the movie's going to be pitched as, and that you say the Endor stuff kind of feels like a placeholder. It might have been. Honestly, because we also know there was a bunch of waffling there where at some point it was going to be the planet Kashyyyk.
Yeah, with the Wookiees, which would have been a smarter choice because we have an emotional connection to Wookiees already.
Yes, I actually think that would have been great. Not for the same reason some Star Wars fans do of Wookiees are big and cool and Ewoks are small and they're both people in fuzzy suits. There is no big difference in that sense between Ewoks and Wookiees, but what it would be is you have Chewbacca, through Chewie you have Han Solo, through Han Solo you have Leia, so you have this immediate emotional connection to the entire cast. Through Wookiees, there would be a pretty easy way, I think, to make the Wookiees feel like they are angry at the Empire.
Yeah.
And you could have something, much more serious, not just in tone, but I think in gravitas going on there that would have been interesting to see.
Yeah.
So, but that got nixed because again, when I say the waffling, I think it's not just the, is this going to be it, is this not going to be it thing. It's also I think George Lucas himself was pretty split on whether he wanted to do a more kid-friendly thing, something more serious. He kind of does both here. So, you'll cut from, a really dramatic Luke scene to the Ewoks playing with C-3PO, and you'll be like, this doesn't feel right, Because, on their own, either of these are fine, I think. But, you put them together, it can be a little odd. I think this happens even within scenes where, I mentioned that Luke-Leia scene, which is where you get the famous speech about, you have that power too.
Yeah.
A beautiful speech. Amazing acting from Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher. I love that scene. What happens immediately after Luke leaves is Han comes in and starts bitching at her like he's in a high school movie.
Yeah.
And it feels below Harrison Ford. It feels below Carrie Fisher. The dialogue is bad. It's pitched in a weird direction. And it is just such an awkward way out of that scene.
And it's one of those things that makes me feel like the Leia sister stuff is complicated. It complicates something about the story that I've it's one of the questions I have, what if they didn't do this? Because it's the callback to the very truncated, withered love triangle of the original Star Wars and, the first 15 minutes or whatever it is of Empire Strikes Back, where there's the vaguest of suggestions of some sort of romantic relationship between Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher, which was never there. That's just not in the characters in the movies. The actors don't have that kind of chemistry.
Well, because that's the thing is I can see it. I can see why you would want to make her his sister, because there is, maybe you come into Star Wars with, okay, we got two guys and a girl, we're going to do a love triangle. That's story as old as time. But you get on set, Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher have a lot of chemistry, but it's not that chemistry.
Yes, it's not romantic.
They have a sibling chemistry or a best friend chemistry. They have a very warm platonic chemistry that is absolutely there. But, I can't see Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher passionately making out or something,
No.
Even though it briefly happens, but not passionately. But you get Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher in a room, and sparks fly. So, obviously, those are the dynamics. Is romance platonic? You could play that in different ways. They don't necessarily play it in any one way in Empire Strikes Back because they're all separated for so long. And you come back here and you make it a literal sister relationship. It's weird because it's hard to put yourself in the mindset of 1983 going into the theater. You have no idea they might be siblings.
Yeah.
It's such a part of the story now, and it's hard for me to imagine any other way, especially when you have things in The Last Jedi, like that beautiful last scene they have together, which, again, that could work if they're not siblings, but,
It's the kind of thing of them, making revealing that information early on, because it's right after the Jabba stuff, Luke goes and has the scene with Yoda, and that's where you find out.
Well, an hour into the movie, but early in the Return of the Jedi segment of the movie.
Again, it's weird having to define relative time scale of Return of the Jedi because of how split it is. But yeah, that's where you find out in the movie, and then it's I just feel like Han Solo and Carrie and Leia should know that like almost immediately. Like there's just something about like them doing this like because it's one of the things that I think kills the Han Solo character in this movie is that you can't like they want to have their dumb joke or whatever about like Han like trying to get it on with Leia, but then thinking, oh, she loves Luke, and there's just the fucking like terrible rom-com misunderstanding of like, oh, yes, I love him. Oh, but no, I didn't. I don't mean it like that. I mean, he's my long-lost secret twin brother. There's like, it's like too literally soap opera. And there's something about that that's like, makes it so that the Leia-Han Solo relationship is nothing in this fucking movie. And it's so bizarre because it's literally half of Empire Strikes Back.
There's one good moment with the two of them, which is where you have, it's the repetition of the I love you, I know moment.
Yeah.
But it's because she has the blaster, and it's the way Harrison looks at her of like, oh, I love you. Like, oh, you've got a gun, this is getting me off. Like that, like there's like a sparks fly moment there. But other than that, yeah, they have no relationship.
And then the next scene they have together is where you have to do this like, oh, well, you know, if I get it, Leia, I won't get in your way. And she's like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's like, oh, right, I forgot to tell you. He's my secret long-lost twin brother. I just didn't mention it last night. For no reason at all, right? It's so bizarre.
It's so funny because Harrison Ford in that scene has to do the sad puppy dog thing of like, I get it, I won't get in the way, and like go away. And it's the most unnatural thing in the world for Harrison Ford to play.
Yeah.
Like Harrison Ford is many things. The guy who just gently gives up on his love interest and sulks off into the night is not like a Harrison Ford thing, you know?
But there is one silver lining to that is that I do love the way he acts like immediately after that's revealed and they kiss and then he just like he opens his eyes and like you see him processing all the information. It's some of like the best facial acting Harrison Ford has ever done. Is like you see so many emotions go through Han Solo in that moment, and it's him just like hitting this point, realizing like, oh wait, I get to be in a relationship with Leia. Okay, like everything is fit into place, and there's something about that I find very funny, but it's not worth all the other shit that they had to shove aside to like create that strange dynamic in this film.
It's very strange. And, you know, again, talking about the waffling and the kind of improvised nature of the film, when they made Empire Strikes Back and Yoda has that line, no, there is another. That was not written to refer to Leia.
No.
They did not have a clear plan in mind. It was so that, you know, maybe they wrap up Luke's story, but if there's more story to be told, there are other characters, and they would maybe bring someone in. They decided it was going to be Leia, and again, you can kind of feel that tension of maybe part of why they do it and introduce it late in the film is because the idea was not necessarily this is the end of Star Wars. Maybe it's in the next movie, Leia is our hero.
Yeah.
Which I would love to see, the alternate universe where that happened. But yeah, and it makes sense if that's where you're going with it, kind of. It makes more sense. But if this is the last Star Wars movie, the way that revelation is doled out is tremendously odd.
Uh-huh.
Although, there is one way I do think it's a little ameliorated today, which is that when you do have the prequels feeding into Episode 6, it all feels a little smoother. And I actually think this is the other like viewing order that has become kind of popularized of Star Wars, where you do 4, 5, and then 1, 2, 3, and then film 6 as a way to like introduce children and people new to the series, which I actually think that's expert. I think that's exactly the way you should show these to people for the first time, because it's very smart, because Episode 4 is the best entry into Star Wars.
Yeah.
Then you do Episode 5, and you end with this tremendous revelation. Then you go back and learn all about Darth Vader and Anakin and all these things. And then when you come back to Episode 6 even feels like it's kind of helping you with that, because it has this protracted opening where you get reintroduced to all the old heroes. If you want to read more about this, a film critic named Drew McWeeny, who kind of popularized this idea of showing them in that order, he wrote it was a series of articles. It's now a book that you can get on his website called You're Watching It Wrong, and it's about him showing Star Wars to his little kids for the first time in that order, and they had none of it spoiled. So like it was a raw showing of this, and it's really fun to read. It's fascinating, and it kind of, I think, sells me on that order. And that's one of the observations he made is like, oh, when you haven't seen these characters for 3 movies, their opening of Return of the Jedi feels way more natural in a weird way. Obviously, that's not how it was made. But yeah, it's definitely one of those things where it feels slightly smoothed over when you have it so set in stone by the prequels that there were 2 babies and things. Although Leia's line about her mother makes no sense in that context, but whatever. So yeah,
whatever.
Is there anything more to say about Leia being Luke's sister?
It's weird.
It's weird.
It's weird. It's weird because it's like, of course, because it has to be that way in my heart of hearts, like, because it is set in stone.
Yeah.
It was set in it was fact before I was born, but it is like something where it's like, but fucking man, this movie doesn't really know entirely what to do with that. It feels mostly that, like, I mean, the best thing that has for this movie is that when Vader can use it to taunt Luke. Like, that is set up well, and, you know, it's part of the conversation Luke has with Obi-Wan, and being like, your feelings do your credit, but they can betray you, all that stuff, like, that works really well, but there's so much other shit that has to go with Luke and Leia secretly being sister and brother.
Yeah, I will say, this issue has never really bothered me much with the movie. Like, I totally see where you're coming from, and I enjoy talking about it. And I think it is because of the Vader scene, sister.
You have a twin sister.
Because it pays off where it needs to pay off so fucking perfectly. Yeah. Again, it's like, that's the thing. Return of the Jedi does not suffer in the places where it matters most. And that's a weird thing. Like, where they drop the ball in the places where you most have room to drop the ball, weirdly. Another question about Leia.
Okay.
Did Leia get a military demotion in this movie? Because she is really clearly, in the first two films, a high-ranking member of the Alliance.
Yeah,
she
especially in Empire Strikes Back. Like, the beginning of that movie, it's clear that she is, like, co-running that fucking base.
Yes. And in this one, she seems to have no role in the planning of any operation. Han Solo has been promoted to general for some fucking reason. I mean, he's a good guy, but I don't know about general. And she's kind of in the background going along with him. It's a little weird. Like, I do really love that episode 7 and 8 planted the stone. Planted the flag. She is General Leia Organa. Really reaffirmed that. But episode 6, like, it's a total background thing, but it did, in watching them in short order after 4 and 5, I was like, what? Did she do something? Like, why is she demoted?
Yeah, it's especially there's just that moment when, and actually there's some stuff about this scene that I do like of like Han and Lando joking around, and then it's like oh man, did they get stuck with that shit job? And it's like, General Solo, have you got, like, I think that's kind of a fun little scene. But there is this weird moment where he's like, I don't have everybody together, and then Leia's like, I'll come with you, and it's just like, what? You're like, Like, is that really the most valuable place that you could be, is as, like, a ground troop on this ground assault? Like, that's what we need you for?
Right. I mean, in A New Hope, in the first movie, she is running the operation from the base.
Yeah.
And she's not in the ships, but she's playing, like, a very crucial role, like, basically co-running the operation with the other people in the room.
Yeah, she's clearly, like, a member of, like, the command structure of the rebellion, and so it's just like, I mean, okay, fine, yeah, you can go, but I really think it would be a lot smarter and safer for you it would be like if Patton decided to go fight on the front lines. Like, I mean, you're the general, man, but I just think it would be smarter for you to stay back there and give the orders, right? Like, that's kind of your job.
I'm really surprised no one's made the General Patton movie where they decide to just completely valorize him that way, as he just gets onto the front line and, like, rips his shirt off and, like, goes, like, super buff.
I mean, it's not even him on the front lines. It's like, it would be like if he decided to be on, like, a paratrooper mission, right, and, like, go behind enemy lines and do this whole, like, it's like, no, like, that's not what we need you for, guys.
Right. Yeah, because it's not like you couldn't have Leia there with a couple of lines, like, explaining it, but it's weird that they don't put any of the work into doing that. Yeah. I do like those scenes, post the rescue, and then all the stuff planning the Endor operation, because it's really the only time outside of A New Hope where you have a good, like, meaty amount of scenes with the main three together.
Yes,
because they're barely together in The Empire Strikes Back. They're barely together in this movie, but you do have a nice, like, you get that triumvirate chemistry again, which you don't get much in the series. And yeah, I almost think they should have. Another way I think of this movie is that obviously, in some ways, Luke's journey has to be solitary because of where it goes. But I also wish there was more of an echo of A New Hope, because, the first movie they're all together is them coming together. The second movie is them being broken apart. It feels like the third movie should have more of a thrust where it's the three of them on a mission together, and it really never is.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but who knows? Let's talk about the beginning of the movie.
Okay, yes. Let's go back to the beginning.
So the episode 5.5, Jabba the Hutt's mansion.
Yes.
I'm sure there's a better title for it.
It's his palace.
Yeah, Jabba's palace.
Yes.
Jabba's Electric Boogaloo. So, anyway. That's a great set of scenes.
It's so good.
It's so good. Just the general way it is set up, where you do have I always forget the movie opens with Vader.
Yeah, and it has like the Star Destroyer shot and everything. It's like, echoing the beginning of New Hope, but it's like, yeah, every time I watch this movie, I forget that scene is there.
I always think the first scene is 3PO and R2-D2 walking through the desert.
Yeah.
Which would be a weird way to open the movie. So, I understand why it starts with Vader. But yes, so you have that. Then you have R2 and 3PO walking through the desert. And I just think the general progression of the Jabba stuff, of you start with the droids, kind of like you did in A New Hope. And they go in and they don't even know fully what's going on. Or I think R2 does, but 3PO doesn't. And then they're thrown into this weird servitude thing. And then Lando comes in disguise. And then Leia comes in disguise. And everyone's kind of planting themselves. And you get the message from Luke sort of throwing down the gauntlet. But we still have not had Luke in person yet. And then Leia rescues Han, but they get captured. And then Luke comes in. And we get Luke for the first time. And then it explodes into all the action and everything.
Yeah.
It is such a great build. It is so well directed. It is just so well edited and scored. It's, as I said, has that wonderful 80s Jim Henson quality where it looks like Labyrinth or The Dark Crystal or something. It's weird. It's another corner of the Star Wars universe we really haven't seen. Like, it's on Tatooine, but now we're with, like, the criminal underbelly. And Luke is so fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And just, like, feeling the character development of Luke, of like, this is the culmination of his character arc so far, is the guy he's become, like, where they choose to show the lightsaber for the first time. I was watching this with my brother, and I just clapped, because it's such a great moment. It's also good.
Yeah, it's like you described earlier, it is basically like this weird short film. It's like they showed an episode of, like, a TV show or something. It's just like this perfect little, like, 30-minute block. Yeah, and it is that... Because there's something about it that does feel like it's like the season premiere of a TV show.
Yes.
Like, there's been some time has passed between the last time we saw these characters, and we have to, like, do this fun reintroduction of all of them. Because that's really, like, if you're looking from a purely, like, functional point of view of how this, like, helps and functions in the larger plot, like, it really is a character introduction. That's, like, the main stuff it does. But it's mostly a character introduction for Luke, because, like, the thing it establishes / reestablishes for Leia is that she loves Han. The thing it establishes for Han is that he's Han, I guess.
Well, he's been in Carbonite. He hasn't had time for character growth.
There's no real character growth there, but he gets a bunch of fun little comedic moments. We get to reestablish that Boba Fett is very cool. He stands with his gun.
Is he very cool?
He's very cool. He stands with his gun.
Yeah, I mean, he dies like a...
He doesn't have any lines of dialogue.
Right.
His only line of dialogue in this movie is, "Ah!" And then the Sarlacc pit burps him up.
It's a literal gag moment. Like, it is Han Solo is like, Boba Fett! And then Boba Fett trips over him, gets his jetpack ignited, falls into the Sarlacc, and then the Sarlacc burps. Like, it's like from an Illumination Entertainment animated movie. It's so silly.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, because, to reiterate, because I don't think we specified earlier, that we are watching all the despecialized versions. So this is basically the theatrical version of the movie. And something that, because I've seen the theatrical versions of all these movies once before, and I remember feeling this that time and had forgotten and got back to it again, is that there are two moments in this movie that I always thought were special edition things that are not special edition things, and both of them involve burps around the Jabba Palace.
No, I know what you're talking about.
Earlier, there's like this, and it's actually a really good little shot, and it's kind of funny of, it's the outside of Jabba's palace at night, and there's like, it's a long shot from far away, and there's a weird little frog monster, and it eats another thing, and then it burps. It blows my mind that is in Return of the Jedi.
I forgot. I looked it up because I'm like, is there a problem with the despecialized edition? No, this has always been in the movie.
And it's one of those things where it makes you feel like when people had this big revolt against Jar Jar Binks with Phantom Menace, it's like, did you watch the last Star Wars movie that was made? Because it has 2 burp gags in it. And it has, I know I'm jumping forward with this, but when I'm thinking about, like, things in this movie that are, like, weird comedic things that I cannot believe are in this movie, is when, in the final battle, Chewbacca has a fucking Tarzan yell. And that's something that always, like, I knew that was not a special edition thing. Because that's not something you add back in, like, 1998 or whatever, That's not like a late edition.
Right.
That's something you put in 1983. But there is a straight up, like, utterly breaking the, like, sense of fiction and place in the world. Chewbacca just yells, does a, oh, but in a Chewbacca voice yell when he swings up to the top of the chicken walker, the ATST. It's like, so yeah, this movie has some weird humor to it that doesn't really work for me, you know? It's like the burp stuff is like, I don't know, it's so unnecessary. But it adds to the overall disgrace of Boba Fett, and the fact that Boba Fett will probably not get his movie.
I mean, if he does, it should just be like a shot on the Sarlacc pit of him getting digested and the Sarlacc burping and farting and like digesting Boba Fett out of its system for 2 hours.
Yes.
It's a time lapse of the Sarlacc pit.
Yes. But anyways, enough of Boba Fett. Going back to
the introduction of the characters.
The introduction of the characters, and for Luke in particular. And it is this just like, you know, you have that nice message that Luke has, and you get, you know, the weird, scratchy holographic technology of Star Wars, and he's sort of calmly kind of threatening Jabba the Hutt a little bit. But then when he shows up and he's totally cloaked, he's dressed all in black, and then he does the fucking force choke thing on the Gamorrean guards. Like, that moment where you're reintroduced to him and he's a little bit frightening is something that I always love about this movie. That you re-meet Luke and he is so much more powerful. He is so much more confident than we've ever seen him be before. And he's sort of, you know, visually echoing things that we know about Darth Vader is so... It's just such an interesting kind of bold decision for reintroducing that character that, like, sets up his arc of being put into the position that Anakin/Darth Vader was in. That, like, you know, now we know he's Anakin with the prequels, but even, you know, like, well established in these movies, at some point there was this point where the Emperor turned a good Jedi, Anakin Skywalker, into Darth Vader, and that's where we're kind of building up to at the end of this movie, and to sort of have him in this position where he's, again, a little bit scary. He has that moment where, after he's killed the Rancor, and Jabba is laughing and, like, dragging them all away, and he just goes, it's like, it's the last mistake you will ever make, which is a line that, like, a fucking Batman villain has, right? Like, it's something that's like...
It's like something Mark Hamill would say in a very different role in the 90s.
Yes. Well, that's the last mistake you will ever make, Jim. Right? Like, it's basically that.
You do a good Mark Hamill Batman.
I've spent a lot of my life honing that. Yeah, no, but it's got that feel to it of, like, that's very much not a Jedi kind of thing to say. Is like, I'm gonna fucking cut you, motherfucker. Like, you fucking pushed over the line, is basically what he's saying. And it's not... Well, it's one of those things that gives him a legitimate sense of character growth when at the end of the movie he decides to go, like, basically full pacifist run, and it's just like, no, throw down my lightsaber, all of that. Is that at the start of the movie, he's choking bitches out, he's killing Rancors, and he's threatening Big Slime Man, you know?
Yes. There's a really interesting deleted scene from Return of the Jedi. Yeah. You can get on the 2011 Blu-ray set, where it's an alternate opening to the movie where you see Luke completing his lightsaber, symbolically becoming a Jedi, and putting it into R2-D2 to set up the later moment.
It's very sexual.
And he communes with Vader through the Force. And I love seeing that scene as a deleted scene. They were 100% right cutting it, because the boldness of the Return of the Jedi opening is how shrouded in mystery it keeps our protagonist, and it lets us rediscover our protagonist through the action of the film. How many movies can you honestly say that is fully done with? You know, I think it's done more since Return of the Jedi. A lot of movies like to borrow the Return of the Jedi structure, but I don't think they ever quite do it as well as this does, with just, again, fully shrouding him in mystery, where part of it also is Luke is preternaturally confident in this film. Yeah. He comes in and he is, look, Jabba, you either die or you bargain with me. And he keeps saying it, and Jabba just keeps laughing him off, and everyone's laughing him off, and even Han Solo is like, this is crazy, what are you talking about? Like, no one quite knows what he's doing. But then you find out, and it goes all the way to Luke is on the plank about to fall into this. They keep it going all the way to there, and only then is when it snaps, he gets the lightsaber, and he goes crazy on all these people. And that is such an interesting way to open your movie. This character has this confidence that they've never had before, that we don't necessarily know is even justified within the diegetic universe. And then he has to prove it to us. And that's what's so great about the action sequence on Jabba's cool sand ship. His skiff.
Well,
yes.
I played a lot of Star Wars video games, and I know what they are all called, because they're all levels in, like, Battlefront and shit.
Exactly. So anyway, it's a really interesting setup for this movie.
Yeah. And then just, like, the execution on it is so incredible. Especially, like, just thinking about that moment where it turns and he's out on... They're, like, literally making him walk the plank, and it's just that dunk. It's so good.
That's one of my favorite Star Wars music cues ever.
Yeah, it's just like, you know that, okay, shit's on. And
Yeah.
and then he jumps off, flies up, and grabs the thing. It's just such a great little action sequence between all the parties involved. And you have, Han Solo blindly stumbling around and accidentally killing Boba Fett.
Yep.
Which is great.
Also, that green lightsaber looks so good.
It's so good. It's the first green lightsaber. You didn't know that lightsabers could be green before.
Exactly. We only had blue and red. I love the green one. It's still one of my favorites. I wish we had more green lightsabers. I think Episode 9 needs to have a green lightsaber. Clearly. Or a new color. I'd be fine with that, too.
There's not many new colors left for Star Wars to do. I mean, I guess like the movies don't do yellow that much, but there are yellow lightsabers at the Attack of the
I guess I would also like a new purple lightsaber. I think that would also be something I'd totally go for.
Sure.
Because I think both of the lightsabers need to be remade. I think Kylo's and Rey's got destroyed. So you gotta go all new. And I think Kylo, he could do red, or he could go purple.
There is a precedent for dark Force users using purple lightsabers. So
there we go.
Yeah,
JJ, call us up.
Yes, but the green lightsaber is great. In particular, like the green blade looks awesome, but also I just love the design of the hilt. I think it's my favorite hilt design. It's kind of based a little bit off of Obi-Wan's lightsaber that he has in Episode 4 and stuff, and in Episode 3. But yeah, it's just like I like it's sort of tall. It's like the activator plate is like this big thing stuck on the side of it. It's fucking cool.
It's great.
It's very cool.
So you have all that. Wonderful opening. One elephant in the room we should discuss is Carrie Fisher in the gold bikini.
Right.
I don't even quite know how to talk about it because it's one of those things we really take for granted.
Yeah.
But imagine if Episode 9 comes out and the opening of the movie is, let's say, Rey gets kidnapped and put into a gold, and Daisy Ridley is forced to wear a gold bikini and do action stunts. We would all be rightfully horrified by that.
Yeah.
And the movie would get laughed out of the room.
Yes.
I hope it would in this day and age.
Yeah. It's weird. It's part of like a larger weird thing with Leia in this movie because it's like, in a way, almost kind of worse to me is like the strange forest princess shit like later that's like so not Leia. Like the need of like this movie kind of comprehensively trying to sort of like traditionally feminize Leia, whether it's in that sexual. I mean, it's almost like I should have written this essay at some point in college. It would have been great of like the Madonna whore complex as represented by Princess Leia in Star Wars Episode 4 Return of the Jedi or Episode 6 Return of the Jedi. Is that you have she's presenting as like vaguely male as like the weird alien bounty hunter the murderer voice, right? But then she gets put into this very sexualized costume, and then she strangles, basically, kills Jabba the Hutt via erotic asphyxiation. It's sort of like that's how that scene goes. It's very
there's the extremely phallic shot of the tail wagging as he dies.
Yes,
that like Sigmund Freud would have a heart attack watching that.
Yeah, it's a lot. And then later, once we get to the Forest Moon of Endor, we get Leia back in some of her more traditional costume. But then when she gets taken by and goes back to the Ewoks' place, apparently the Ewoks just have like a human dress around, and Leia's. I don't know if she found hair extensions. I don't know if she just has the densest fucking buns in the history of human hair. But her hair goes down to like her hips. It's ridiculous. And so it's like she's full like Disney princess.
I like the idea that we are missing a scene in Return of the Jedi where she twirls and sings with the Ewoks, and they like go out into the forest and with all their forest friends create like cloth and silk and like sew her a new dress.
It's like it's one step away from a cartoon bird alighting upon her shoulder, right? It's like and it's so weird to me. I don't understand I don't understand practically within the movie. Like the idea of where these clothes come from, what motivates Leia. Like, there's no reason for Leia to change clothes and drop her hair and do all that shit. She's about to go on a fucking military operation in like 12 hours. I don't know. And then at the very end of the movie, when like the Jub scene and all that shit, she's back in that costume again. It's a weird. The treatment of Leia in this movie as a whole is strange to me.
I think there's a difficult but necessary conversation to have about Leia in the Star Wars trilogy. Mm-hmm. Which is that, I think everyone loves Leia as a character for different reasons, and everyone loves Carrie Fisher as an actress because she's amazing in these movies. I think Leia is a really inconsistent character that I don't think across the 3 movies they ever had a consistent identity for. In the writing, I think Carrie Fisher did. And I do think these are 2 different conversations. Like, I have nothing bad to say about Carrie Fisher, the person, the actor, the performance.
Yeah.
That's all amazing. But I think especially now that with the new trilogy we have another significant female protagonist to talk about in Rey, and it is, to me, such a night and day thing in like how much characterization they have given her, how much room they've given Daisy Ridley to build that character. You just see how much the times have changed.
Yeah.
Like, Leia Organa was kind of a character who came 30 years too early. Because, characters in these, male-directed sci-fi fantasy action films weren't given the space to be what I think Leia in our minds is, but I don't think is truly actualized in the movies. Because in A New Hope, she's like 5 different things. She's a completely schizophrenic character. Yeah. She's like British aristocracy. She is this like sex object. When Luke comes in and she says the thing about aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper, they have her posed that way for a reason.
Yes.
She is a cool badass heroine as well. And, obviously I don't think you necessarily get the lineage of stronger female characters in movies like this without what Leia went through in these movies. But you have that in that film. You have Empire Strikes Back is probably the best and most consistent characterization of her, but she is also very clearly third fiddle to the 2 male characters. Yeah. And I don't think you could really view it any other way than that. Like, it's not the Han-Leia love story as seen through Leia's eyes. It's the Han-Leia love story as seen through Han's eyes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then in Return of the Jedi, there's all the problems we've just said. So, like, Leia is a really super important character in the history of blockbuster cinema and mainstream American cinema, but she is also a clearly very transitional figure, where I think she was ahead of her time in a ton of ways. But also part of being ahead of your time is that sometimes you're not realized in the way we would now. Like, again, I think if you showed Star Wars to kids today with, like, modern standards and you put, like, Leia and Rey up to each other, kids are going to gravitate way more towards the Daisy Ridley performance. Not because Daisy Ridley is a better actor or, like, the character is better in theory. I'm not necessarily saying that. But that, like, the language for that just is so much more developed now of the action heroine and what you can do with that. Because there's also like, the different elements of like, how do we code Leia is part of what you're talking about. Yeah. And Return of the Jedi goes really hard on like traditional stereotypical, maybe even cliched, feminizing codes of the sexualizing and the Disney princess thing. Whereas, like, when they want to make her like an action hero in like A New Hope, they go for the very masculinized codes, Yeah. I think Empire Strikes Back is the one where you most clearly let her just be a human being. Whereas you come down to like Rey in Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and that's not really a problem. They're not having to like heavily feminize or masculinize her. She's just Rey, and she is a character who gets to do things, and if she picks up a lightsaber and has a fight, they don't have to go like, you don't have to cut to Harrison Ford being like, wow, that kind of thing.
That girl sure can swing a lightsaber.
She's a credit to her sex. They don't do that. That's nothing in Star Wars is that bad, but
it's not Victorian.
Yeah, and obviously I think there's the conversation to be had about like Padme Amidala in the prequels, who is also and I think Padme is much worse done overall than Leia is. Yeah. So maybe it's also,
but also like Padme has a lot more prominence in her stories in episode 2 and 3 than Leia ever has in the 3 movies.
Yeah. So it's a bigger conversation than us 2 white guys can have about this fully, but like it is an interesting one because I think Leia has a reputation in our minds and hearts for very good reason. But it's also, when you critically pick it apart, it's, as I said, it's a very transitional thing in film history.
But, and weirdly enough, because Return of the Jedi is the last one of these movies with that character, in the original trilogy, but it is also, I think it uses her by far the worst. And it's like, it's very weird. It's like the overall strangeness of Return of the Jedi is like, it just feels like the movie has no idea what to do with Han or Leia. It's like it only knows what to do with Luke, and it does it very well. But like the Han and Leia stuff is just like so in the wind.
It ultimately kind of has the too many characters problem. Because the movie's about Luke, and it doesn't quite know how to accommodate everyone else. Sort of like we talked about like The Last Jedi. I think if you got Rian Johnson under Truth Serum and said, what would you have changed about The Force Awakens to make your movie? He probably would have said fewer protagonists, But even then, The Last Jedi is able to go to the effort of giving each protagonist an interesting arc and journey. So I don't think it's as obvious a problem in that film as it is in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, The Last Jedi has that problem of inheriting a lot of too many characters for the story it wants to tell. But The Last Jedi, at least tries to do something with all of them, to varying success with different characters. Return of the Jedi feels like it inherits that problem, but then also just doesn't care enough to try to do anything with it. Fuck it.
Yeah, you can. I think maybe the weakest part of The Last Jedi overall is the Finn and Rose subplot, probably. But I would also say that's a lot better than the Endor stuff with Han.
Oh yes, it is the kind of thing of where if that could have been siphoned off from that, if that was its own story and its own mini movie or something, it would have been perfectly fine.
Yeah.
It's just in the context of having all this other shit going on, it gets stuffed up.
Yeah. So anyway. That is probably a good, exhaustive discussion of where the Leia in the gold bikini kind of comes from.
Yes.
I will say, I do think there is something maybe visually poignant in where the gold bikini goes, in that there's the autoerotic asphyxiation thing, which is a whole
erotic, because the auto means to do it to himself.
Sorry.
I almost made the same mistake.
Yeah.
It's very important that we distinguish between autoerotic asphyxiation and just normal erotic asphyxiation.
It's the core of this podcast.
It really is. It's bubbling underneath the surface. It's Doctor Who, it's Persona, and it's specific linguistic differences between different sexual fetishes.
Yes. Okay. The specific thing I was going to say here, though, is that you have, Carrie Fisher / Leia thrown into this, horrible sexualized attire that is probably extremely demeaning and humiliating to be put in.
And almost certainly horribly uncomfortable.
I mean, Carrie Fisher talked about that a lot,
yes.
And then she still does, though, take control of the situation. She gets out on her own. She does not need help getting out of all of this. She is triumphant.
One of the single most violent acts in any of these movies.
Yes.
It is pretty gruesome.
And it is, I think, in the meta more than in the story itself, it feels so much like this weird, visually poignant metaphor for Carrie Fisher's career in some ways.
Sure,
people putting her in situations that she probably would not put herself in, and fuck it, I'm going to make this my own.
Yeah.
So, we love you, Carrie Fisher. We miss you.
Yes.
All right. So that's all the Jabba the Hutt stuff. Anything else to say about all that? My brother did know when we were watching it. There's the big explosion at the end where they broke the skiff, and it's a miraculous, a wonderful explosion.
Yeah.
And then Thomas said, man, they killed a lot of people to get Han Solo back.
They killed at least probably 100 people.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot of death. The one that hits the hard, there's a couple that hit pretty hard, is probably Max Rebo was on that.
Is he the blue guy?
He's the blue guy.
I was just about to say that. I love the blue elephant dude, Max Rebo, as you say, and I had never made the connection before until this viewing when Thomas said that. I'm like, oh fuck, they killed Max Rebo.
Yeah, he's dead. Salacious Crumb, the Kowakian monkey lizard, is almost certainly dead.
I think the special edition, what they should have done is had Max Rebo on the barge with them as they're going away, playing music, so just that, he's with them.
Or there's at least a shot after, because after they did this make sure you get the droids, and they have this weird shot of the two magnets going down and picking up R2 and C-3PO, which feels like such a reshoot or something of oh wait, fuck, how do R2 and C-3PO they just disappeared and then they come back later in the movie. It's we have to film this weird thing, and there should have just been a special edition shot of it pans over and you just see Max Rebo and Salacious Crumb's heads pop out of the sand and look around.
No. Here's what I want: the magnet comes down, and the thing it attaches to in the sand is Max Rebo's saxophone. Yes, and it pulls him out playing the sax.
He's holding onto it, playing it as he comes up, and then Salacious Crumb is holding onto his foot.
Speaking of the special edition,
okay, yeah,
let's talk about that for a minute.
Okay, yeah,
because Return of the Jedi is far and away the most bastardized of the special editions. It gets hit hard, and I will tell you, I had not watched the despecialized edition of Jedi before now. I am so happy we have it. I'm so happy because I could live with the special editions of New Hope and Empire. I don't like them as much, but I could live with it. I cannot watch the special edition of Return of the Jedi, especially the 2011 one where they add Darth Vader's note.
Yeah, I've never seen that version of the movie.
You're lucky.
Yeah.
It's awful. It's awful. It's the worst special edition change by far, and it was made in the last round of changes, which is so weird. But yeah, I mean, they literally, if you don't know what we're talking about, in the climactic scene of the movie when Luke is on the ground getting electrocuted by the Emperor and saying, "Father, please!" Yeah. And then Darth Vader is looking back and forth, they literally dub in the "no" from Revenge of the Sith.
Yes, it's the exact same audio file.
I'm pretty sure it is. There's an extra one, he goes, "No. No!" The same way he did it, without his voice breaking at the end like mine did. I'm not James Earl Jones, if you can't tell. And yeah, it's the most awful special edition change. But one of the other most awful ones is in the Jabba the Hutt sequence. You have this really cool little like jazz scene where our friend Blue Elf, what was his name?
Max Rebo.
Max Rebo and his band are playing, and you have the girl dancing. It's the song Lapty Neck, if you're looking for it. And it's just this great little, like, moody jazz number that sets the atmosphere. And that is replaced in the special edition with the iconically awful CGI dance sequence with the, like, big-lipped space woman
thing. I don't like that. I don't like that alien.
I have used that as a podcast theme song before, ironically, because it's so over-the-top funny. It's bad. It comes out of nowhere. The movie then goes back to the normal, like, Jabba atmosphere, which is nothing like that.
I mean, it full on has, like, the shot, like, into the, like, shaking uvula, right? Like, It's like, it goes all the way with it.
That's bad. Yeah, there's a lot of alterations throughout the movie. That's the one that I remember.
The burping frog monster, however, that was in the original version of the movie.
There are some controversial ones at the end. Maybe we'll get to that when we talk about the end of the movie, because it does have an altered ending sequence, and there's a couple different layers of alteration, some good, some bad, that I think we should talk about, but we'll get there when we get there. Yeah. So yeah, but I just want to praise again the despecialized editions by Harmy. They're amazing, and I actually this time, my brother, I remembered, because I had forgotten about this, he has a really powerful computer with a Blu-ray burner, and so I had him make me Blu-rays of all three. And if you have the ability to do that, you should do that, because they look much better coming off a Blu-ray than just off your computer or something, or a hard drive connected to your TV, because a Blu-ray is an actual like mastered thing that has a blue laser reading it that creates the high-definition effect. It's great, and I'm really glad I have these, and I put all the audio tracks on there, so I also showed Thomas a couple scenes of Darth Vader in Japanese, because his Japanese... Yes, fantastic.
It's good. I like Japanese Star Wars a lot.
Japanese Star Wars is a really good dub.
It is. It's great.
Yeah, and the despecialized editions have all that audio. They have the music only option, which we watched the scene where Vader and Luke go at each other with the audio, with the music only, which is amazing. But yeah, I'm really happy I made Blu-rays of that. Maybe Sean, I'll make you some Blu-rays if you'd like those.
I would like that.
Because what I did is I took my Blu-ray box set and I took out discs 4, 5, 6. And I put them in an envelope somewhere, and I put in my new Blu-rays, and I'm like, it's all I need. Nice. I'm happy that it's there, and I never have to worry about Star Wars again, because someone has done the restoration, and if Disney someday ponies up to do a proper one, I will give it a look, but I don't need it anymore. So there you go.
Nice.
All right, what else to talk about with Return of the Jedi? We've already talked about that middle section of the movie a lot.
I want to talk about the Yoda scene. Let's talk about the Yoda scene. Yoda and Obi-Wan stuff. There's a lot of great shit in there.
Yeah. Oh, I love all this. So yeah, Luke goes back to Dagobah, and we have a little reprise of Empire Strikes Back there, and yeah, we get another just beautiful fucking scene with Yoda.
Yeah, and it's just, it's another area where you get so much of the sense of how much Luke has changed. I think is one of the great things that scene does is you know, having him go back to Yoda after he's had all of these experiences and sort of become this more... He's not fully a Jedi Knight yet because he must confront Darth Vader, but he has all that confidence he has now that he did not have. It was like the core thing he was missing the last time he was training under Yoda. And there's something about that dynamic and revisiting that as Yoda is slowly, dying from old age that is really effective, and having that contrast there works so well. Another thing about the scene, though, that fascinated me that I've never quite noticed before, and I think is because we're doing this prequel to original trilogy thing that made it really stand out to me, is how much Revenge of the Sith and Return of the Jedi contrast in this moment, where so much like the core plot of Revenge of the Sith is about Anakin's fear of death and him wanting to become immortal, and you have all the shit with Palpatine, and some called it unnatural and all that shit, that him telling Anakin about the secret to immortality. And then Yoda gives like this whole speech about death and how death is a natural part of the Force and it's time for him to move on, and he's so accepting of it, and it's like part of what it means to be a Jedi is to let go of that fear of death and accept it as the natural order of things, that I had never noticed the way that those two things contrasted, because I've never watched these movies in this like direct like sequence before. And I thought that was really cool and like actually very effective like narrative structure.
Absolutely. There is just something beautiful about what the Yoda scenes, both in Empire and Return of the Jedi, do about making the Force feel palpable to the viewer. And it really is amazing to me that the Yoda scene, this was made 3 years later, different director, a lot of writing back and forth went into all this. And yet that feels like just a scene out of Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
Like they could have shot it with that movie and held it for 3 years, because it is such a beautiful send-off to the Yoda character. I say send-off, we only knew him for 2 movies at this point, or 1 movie, and then now this. But it really, as you say, it furthers Luke's character. I think the writing for Yoda is so gorgeous. Like, I like Yoda a lot in the prequels and the expanded universe when we get him, but I don't think Yoda's writing has ever been as poetic as it is in the first 2 films he's in.
Yeah.
I think Last Jedi did a good job trying to recapture that as much as you can. But there's just something about, I think, that moment and Lawrence Kasdan's writing and Frank Oz's performance at the time. In part because Yoda is not having to be like a huge expository character the way he is in like 1, 2, 3, or a very active action character as he is in those films, where he really does sound like this kind of monk, prophet, very thoughtful person. And I love listening to his dialogue, and I love listening to it here as he's dying, and it takes him forever to kind of pass on. And there's the thing of Luke saying, why didn't you tell me, and Yoda not wanting to talk about it.
Yeah.
All the turns in that are beautiful. And then I think the seamless transition to Luke leaving the little hut, and I love the light goes out. And then Obi-Wan is there, and transitioning into that scene and the confrontation there. Again, pretty much anything Mark Hamill touches in this one is beautiful and perfect.
Yeah, so well done. One Yoda line I really like in particular, again, kind of like having this prequel thing to it that really connects well for me, is when Luke confronts Yoda about like whether or not Darth Vader is his father, and then Yoda's kind of trying to avoid it, and then just he's I love like Yoda's sort of like rolled onto his side. It's like, I'm tired, like go away, like I don't want to talk about this. He rolls onto his side, and you have that great camera shot of where you can see Yoda facing the camera and Luke behind him, and then Yoda finally just breaks down and says, "Your father, he is." And like goes full like Jedi Master Yoda, like lets go of like the affectations that he puts on, and there's something about the way that line is delivered that so links up with prequel Yoda to me in this way that like I was really kind of taken aback by how much it felt like, right, this is a dude who knew Anakin Skywalker, and it was just something of like, most of the time with the original trilogy, the prequel thing doesn't really do much for me. Like they just feel like they're very separate, and I think that's fine. That's how most prequel stuff works. That is very much how a solo Star Wars story is, right? It just feels like this is like same characters but different separate like things in many ways. But there are a couple of moments in this movie in particular, and some of them in that Yoda scene, where it's just like, I just all of a sudden really believe, right, this is that Yoda. This Yoda knew that Anakin Skywalker, and it is contiguous. It's like there's something like the magic trick works on me for a little bit.
Yeah. The other magic trick is the puppet performance. Just once again, like, because you talk about that scene where it's the shot of Yoda on his side, Luke behind him. The amount of facial expression Frank Oz gets out of that puppet. It's in, like, CGI can't do it. It's a weird thing, but, like, CGI is technically way more limitless than the puppet. You cannot get that level of expression out of it, at least on a character like Yoda. I mean, obviously there's been breakthroughs like Gollum or Caesar, and pick a Andy Serkis character.
Right.
But, like, it really is amazing to me that, like, it's fucking cloth and sticks, and it's so good.
Yes.
Yeah. What about the Obi-Wan scene?
The Obi-Wan scene is great. It has maybe my favorite line delivery in any of these movies, which is when Obi-Wan sits down and like explains everything of like, well, you see, like your father Anakin was a good Jedi who was turned to evil by the Emperor and was destroyed by it, and he became Darth Vader, is destroyed by that evil. So you see, what I said was true from a certain point of view, and then this is the line delivery I love, is that Luke just going, from a certain point of view, and him just not buying Obi-Wan's bullshit. It's like, you lying old man. No, it's not. I mean, yeah, in this weird philosophical sense, sure, it's true. Also, the dude's my dad. Like, come on.
Yeah, it's this wonderful, like, what they are really doing is writing themselves out of the hole of they didn't know who Darth Vader was in Episode 4.
Yeah.
So that's what they're doing. But what it turns into is like, good God, if this is canonically true, Obi-Wan was horrible to Luke in lying like that.
Yeah.
And so you have to, but I do think they thread the needle correctly, because I think that's 100% what Obi-Wan would say, and I think that's 100% what Luke would respond with, right?
Yeah, and it's something that, again, like in the larger tapestry of Star Wars, like, it's such a critical thing to me, of the sense of, like, Luke is different from Obi-Wan and Yoda in how he is a Jedi, right? And there's something, like, very distinct about that, of, like, Luke has put so much value on the sense of the truth and of knowing something like that. It is why in Empire he needs to confront Darth Vader. And when Yoda says earlier in the scene, when Yoda's still alive, he basically says, like, it's unfortunate that you went before your training was complete, before you were ready to bear this burden. But it's like, he would never be ready. Like, you're never ready to bear that burden. I think it's one of the things where, like, it's one of the areas where it feels like Yoda and Obi-Wan are very much mistaken with how they go about trying to train Luke and prepare Luke for this Darth Vader thing.
Because the implication of all this is, and this is why I think these scenes are great, and then a setup for what is to come, and about the choices Luke, the very clear choices laid out before Luke and what he will do, and that, what makes him the greatest Jedi here is he makes a decision unlike anyone before him.
Yes.
And what's laid out here is that very clearly Yoda and Obi-Wan want him to kill Darth Vader. They want to train him to where he can murder this guy.
I mean, that's what, like Obi-Wan literally says, is like, and Luke's like, I don't think I can kill my father. It's like, it's already too late.
Yeah.
It's basically,
and that's their view. And their view also is clearly like, well, Luke probably won't want to kill his dad, so we're not going to tell him, and maybe we'll tell, like, Darth Vader will be dead on the floor, decapitated, and then Obi-Wan will show up as a ghost and be like,
by the way, I just feel like I should tell you, he is your dad. Sorry, he's your dad. Let me think. I mean, it was what I told you was true. It wasn't a total lie. From a certain philosophical standpoint, from a certain point of view, he was not your, but yeah, he was your dad. Yeah, he's your dad.
But anyway, boy. We're having a buffet day here in the Force, so I gotta leave you here. You did a great job. He is your dad. I'm gonna go have some shrimp. And then
you 100% just committed patricide, but hey, that's on you.
Yeah.
It's on you, man. I'm dead. It wasn't me. I didn't kill him.
So it is. And I had never really grasped that as a kid, because obviously that's a deeper concept than you probably would as a kid.
Yeah.
But yes, it's very much there, which is that they kind of wanted to manipulate this poor kid into killing his dad. And that's what's so great about this, is that they don't shy away from that element of it. They really lean into it, and lean into Luke has actions laid out before him. One is kind of the traditional action movie hero route, which is he's just going to fight the bad guy on top of a roof as a building explodes and kill him. Or he's going to do the most unthinkable thing for an action movie hero and just throw his sword aside.
Yeah.
And that's where we come to. So that's the Yoda and Obi-Wan stuff. We've talked about Endor. Anything else to say about, like, the Ewoks?
There's the scene in the end where the two Ewoks are running away together, and then one of them gets shot and killed, and the other Ewok, like, pushes him over and then, like, realizes he's dead and sits down and hugs him, and is the saddest thing that's ever been in any movie ever.
It's certainly the saddest moment in any Star Wars movie.
Any movie ever.
It comes out of so left field, where none of the Ewok stuff is pitched at that level, and then it's like, let's just do a little, like, gritty war drama here with our fucking teddy bears. And you've got two teddy bears, one dead and one, like, trying to wake it and then just, like, cradling it. No, it really is. Like, I kind of, like, teared up this time. It was so dark.
It's so dark. It's so sad. But it's just, like, feels like it comes out of nowhere. But it's something where, like the Ewok stuff, I want to just get all the Ewok stuff out of the way, because I want to revisit the question I posed earlier, which is, why the fuck do the Ewoks fight the Empire? And it's so strange to me that there's not, like, because it's not hard, like, to put a scene in there where the Empire, like, because the idea that immediately comes to mind, and this is probably what they were going to do if it was Wookiees, because it's an established thing in the Wookiee, like, stuff in the expanded universe, is that the Wookiees were made slaves by the Empire because they're great workers, they're physically robust. Obviously, the Ewoks maybe aren't the best slave workers, considering they're, like, 2-foot tall teddy bears, but still, like, the idea of, like, the Empire having kidnapped all these Ewoks and using them as slave labor or something like that, gives the Ewoks a direct motivation and puts in the sense of like, okay, like we're all in this together. Like no matter who we are, where we come from, the Empire is this force for evil in the galaxy, and we all have to work together to fight it, which feels kind of like what they're going for, but they just never make that full step. They just never show anything that has ever happened to the Ewoks. Like the Ewoks are this strange forest people that exist. They're like the fucking Tom Bombadil of Star Wars. It's just like they're so removed from everything else in the universe. It's just like, what are you guys? Like, where did you come from? How are you so isolated when there's all these Empire dudes building a fucking shield generator right here, and they don't even know you exist?
You say the Tom Bombadil of Star Wars, and now I'm imagining the Rankin Bass Ewok special where they sing a bunch of J.R.R. Tolkien songs while building a hut or something.
They did make those Ewok cartoon movies. That was the thing that happened.
They did. The Ewoks were popular.
The Ewoks were definitely popular.
Here's the thing. I do like the idea of the Ewoks taking on the Empire in the end, and I like that this, the Emperor's plan is like, I have this unassailable ground force on the forest moon of Endor, and nothing can defeat it, and your friends are fucked. And what makes your friends unfucked in the end is that the Ewoks are there, the Empire didn't think about them, they didn't account for them, and the Ewoks kind of get one over on them. I really do like that about this movie.
It's a Vietnam parallel, 100%. From the Vietnamese point of view is what it's trying to be.
And I like that a lot. But there's no doubt that if you set it up a little bit better and give the Ewoks clearer motivation coming into this thing, other than just, these guys are kind of creepy stomping through our forest, yes, I think you could make that last act of the movie from the Ewoks' perspective even more interesting and powerful.
I mean, it's really this strange gold man that came out of the sky says that we should destroy them, and he is our religious icon, so I guess we should do it, is kind of what it really is.
I mean, if nothing else, all you have to do is have a scene where, Leia is trying to convince the Ewoks to fight, and they say no. And then, out on patrol, one of the Ewoks gets killed, and you have that sad scene there, and then they rise up and decide to fight. That would be like the, C-level, just basic cross the dot, or cross your eyes.
Yeah.
I don't know, dot your eyes,
cross your T's, dot your I's.
That sort of thing. And they didn't really even do that, so it's weird.
Yeah, it's because it's also, there's something about, what the version it should be is such a common trope that it immediately makes me think of fucking Black Panther, and M'Baku is 100% that. Of, we've encountered this we have this other army force that we can bring in at the end. It's like the fucking Rohan in Return of the King. It's a very common thing of, we have more to us. We have, we are now unified together and united against our common enemy. And they just don't give the Ewoks enough of a sense of character and world and drama and arc in the story that it just sort of happens. Another question I have, do the Ewoks just routinely have gigantic logs suspended in the forest by vines that are designed in such a way when you cut one vine, they smash together at the right height to destroy chicken walkers? Or are they so amazing that they set that up in the middle of a fucking battle? Because
I think the Ewoks are crafty. They're crafty motherfuckers. Some crafty little Build-A-Bears. I want to know, there's a scene where they are preparing to spit roast Luke and Han, and I want to know, is this a thing that has happened before, where humanoid creatures have landed on their planet, they have captured them, and they have cannibalized. I guess that's not cannibalizing, but they have eaten them.
Yeah, murdered and eaten them. I mean, they did it. Maybe they just didn't have a droid with them, so it's oh fuck.
Maybe there is a prequel to Return of the Jedi where a different rebel force goes out and scouts it. Maybe that's what happened to those poor Bothans who stole this information.
Yes.
They got eaten alive by the Ewoks.
Because a lot of Bothans died for this. I mean, we assume they died.
Yeah.
We haven't heard anything. The Empire hasn't, they just kind of mysteriously disappeared on the forest moon of Endor. I don't know.
When they make the sequel, Rogue One 2, describing how they got the second Death Star plans, I want that to be in the movie. The Ewoks just eat them alive.
I really want to see the scene in that movie where they pick that call sign and it's did you read what happened to the last team that were called Rogue One? You do know they all horribly died, right? I mean, they accomplished their mission. Horrible deaths.
Yes.
Maybe pick a different call sign.
Anyway, but yes, that'll be Star Wars Rogue One 2. The other thing I love about the Ewoks is that we call them teddy bears. That's not a joke. They look like teddy bear costumes.
Yeah, I have a teddy bear that my mom had from when she was a kid, which is way before Return of the Jedi came out. That looks 100% like an Ewok. So much so that when I was a kid, I think I assumed that it was an Ewok toy until I asked my mom, where did this teddy bear come from? It's really old. It's like, oh no, it was my teddy bear when I was a little girl. It's like, oh. Okay, right, no. My whole perspective on teddy bears and Ewoks and there being a distinction between the two dissolves that.
There's like nothing realistic or functional about their design. And this is something I do love about the original Star Wars trilogy that we've gotten so far away from, which is fine, but it's also like, it's a nostalgia thing for me that like a lot of the sets and things and props in Star Wars just look kind of cheap and weird, like chintzy. You know, that's the Jim Henson. I'm not saying Jim Henson is like cheap and chintzy, but there's no effort to make the like puppets in the Jabba lair look like super realistic and functional. The Ewoks are clearly teddy bears. There's a lot of things like that. Like, you know, Dagobah is an elevated set on a soundstage, and it's not really being more than that. Like, there's just some of those things I really like about these movies. Also, like, it's with Ewoks, it's down to their eyes are just like teddy bear button eyes.
Yes, yeah. They're just like little glass eyes, yeah.
Here's one of the fucking worst special edition changes. You might not even know this one, Sean. Is in the 2011 Blu-rays, they added the Ewoks blinking. And it is...
I remember hearing about it. It seemed like a GIF.
It's the creepiest thing. It shouldn't happen. Like, would it make more sense for the Ewoks to blink? Yes. But when they're literal teddy bears...
their eyes are eternally moist. They don't need to blink.
But it's like... They're fucking... They didn't, like, replace the eyes. They just added CGI eyelids. And I don't remember if this is actually in the special edition or if this is, like, a video someone made. But I also remember the eyelids, like, making a weird sound when they blinked. Like a squishing sound. That could be completely a false memory of mine. But, like, it was just fucked up. The Ewoks shouldn't blink.
Yeah, you have two choices. You either don't make the Ewoks blink, or you give the Ewoks photorealistic CG human eyes that blink. It's like, you gotta go one way or the other, right?
Oh, man. It'd be like if they just decided to CGI C-3PO blinking suddenly.
Sure,
be like, what the hell are you doing? C-3PO don't blink, he's a robot. Alright, anyway. So those are the Ewoks.
One last thing about that section of the movie that I think I noticed more this time, that I think is one of the things that contributes to the Forest Moon of Endor stuff being really dull, mostly, is I think it just looks dull. Like, the way it's shot, the forest environment, there's something about it that's just there's nothing exciting about it visually, especially contrasted with the space battle and the very moody, like, Emperor Throne Room. All that stuff has this, like, interesting visual style to it. That the forest just like, ugh.
I made this joke to my brother when we were watching the movie. It's like, oh look, they just landed on the forest moon of Northern California.
Yeah.
Because that's where they are. And like, I know that both because it's just a production tidbit and because I've been in that forest. Literally. It's in San Francisco. It is a couple, not a couple, but miles, but a couple hours north of where Skywalker Ranch is. And that's where they shot it. And it is the cheapest looking thing in Star Wars because... there's nothing fantastical about it. It's a forest that many people have been to, that you can go to. It's redwoods. Like, it's a very California forest. Like, there's nothing alien about it.
There's nothing alien about it, but then it's just also, I think the way they shoot it, it just looks flat to me. Like, there's just nothing, there you can shoot movies in the forest and it looks fucking cool. There's no sense of, like, I don't know, the cinematography or artfulness to it. Like, it feels so sapped of, like, a visual aesthetic to me that it stood out to me, particularly because New Hope and Empire Strikes Back are so visually interesting. Like, no matter what location you're in, they're very striking. Even if it is like just in a desert or it's just like in a snowy field, the way it's shot is very compelling. And the forest is just like, it's just the forest. It looks like it could be a fucking TV show. Half those shots.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth talking about here when you mention the direction there that we're not sure who directed Return of the Jedi fully. The directorial credit is a man named Richard Marquand, who people don't know very well. He died shortly after Return of the Jedi. This came out in 1983. He died in 1987. He died young. He was only 49. He had made a film before this called Eye of the Needle that is a British spy film. It stars Donald Sutherland. It is a famous film, like not super famous, but like it is well regarded. It was well regarded when it came out, kind of considered a classic now. But other than that, he did not have a ton of like high-level credits. He was mostly a TV director before that. I think it was that film that convinced Lucas to hire him for this. But famously, like, George Lucas wanted to do what he did on Empire. He wanted to have someone else direct the film, and they went through a bunch of directors who would not do it. There's the famous tidbit that David Lynch was offered. I mean, David Lynch was full-on offered it. If David Lynch had said yes, we would have today Return of the Jedi as directed by David Lynch.
Yeah. But instead of doing that, he went and made Dune, which is like... It's sad. I would love to see David Lynch Return of the Jedi, but Dune was the movie he needed to make at that moment in time. I think we all know that. Everyone who's seen that movie knows that.
Yes. I just love that he turned down Return of the Jedi and instead did...
did Dune, the movie that he didn't want to put his name to. Which is,
yes.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And then isn't one of the other directors he went for was Cronenberg, who didn't want to do it?
Cronenberg wanted to do it, or he wanted Cronenberg to do it, yep.
That would have been a very... That's where you can see, like, that Jabba the Hutt scene would have been... fucking something if David Cronenberg made this movie, right? Man.
Jabba the Hutt as played by Jeff Goldblum.
Yes. Just, man, think of the effects, think of the blood, there's just a piss coming out of fucking Jabba the Hutt. It would be great.
So he went for some very high-profile directors, and the highest profile, like the one he really wanted to do it, is he wanted Spielberg to do it. Lucas really wanted Spielberg to do it. Spielberg wanted to do it. Like, Spielberg was on board with this, he wanted to do the film, but at this point, George Lucas was not... I think he had left some of the guilds or something. Like, he was having union disputes with, like, the American unions, which is still common, frankly. But the Directors Guild of America would not let Steven Spielberg do it, and so he could not have Spielberg do the film. And so, after going through all these either high-profile, kind of up-and-coming directors like Lynch or Cronenberg, or high-profile, very established directors like Spielberg was at this point, this is post-Raiders of the Lost Ark, he went with Richard Marquand, who was basically an unknown, basically kind of a TV director, very much a TV producer sort of relationship. And it has always been kind of a mystery how much of the movie Marquand actually did the direction on set, the way Irvin Kershner did for Empire, and how much Lucas did, because Marquand was reportedly very uncomfortable with the special effects. There were a lot of things that he was not... I don't know if it was an ability thing or just a comfort thing, but he wasn't comfortable with it. And so Lucas wound up on set much more than was planned. And we're not sure who did what. You know, it would be easy to say maybe Marquand was mostly responsible for the Endor stuff and that's why it's flat. But that could be very disrespectful because we don't know it. That could all be the Lucas stuff, you know. Return of the Jedi is far and away of the first three the most ambitious on a technical level. It has crazy amounts of stuff going on in space. All of the Tatooine stuff, like if you like the barge sequence, it's crazy how they were able to do that and how many like matte effects are going on. So I really don't know who did what. And the weirdest thing is, just like every other part of Return of the Jedi, it's really schizophrenic. Yeah. Some parts of this are incredibly well directed, better directed than anything in Star Wars.
That Empire throne room sequence, like the fight between Luke and Darth Vader, is incredible.
Yes, but as you say, the Northern California stuff, very poorly directed overall, I would say. Like, I think some of the stuff near the end is better when you get into the battle sequences, but even then, it's not the most exciting Star Wars battle. So who knows? Richard Marquand's name is on it, and it seems like he must have done some very good work on it because the movie is largely very good. But I don't know. It is a weird scenario, and we're probably never going to know the full story. This would inform, though, later, when George Lucas came back to do the prequels, he still wanted to do the thing where he had someone else direct the movies.
And he wanted Spielberg to do it again then. Yeah. It's just like,
and Spielberg finally talked to him and said, George, these are your movies. You know how you want to do them. You need to just direct these films. And finally, talked some sense into Lucas, because it's such a weird arc where, this is George Lucas's baby, but at this point he didn't want to direct movies. But he wanted, it's a weird thing. He was trying to do a producer level relationship that was dying in film, that did not exist anymore. So it's a weird thing. But so that's kind of the directorial story. But let's talk about the best part of Return of the Jedi.
Yes.
The Imperial throne room sequence, as you say. Holy cow. Just all of it. Literally, as I said earlier, all the stuff with Luke, Vader, and the Emperor could not be any better if they tried.
Yeah.
It is note for note, shot for shot, edit for edit, score cue for score cue, a perfect interlocking sequence of film.
Yeah, it's amazing. I like the little bits of build up, like that one scene you have with Luke and Vader alone on the Forest Moon, and where Luke has surrendered himself to the Empire and come in. in cuffs, and then like I love when like they start the conversation and Darth Vader just turns and starts walking, and Luke just starts walking with him, and there's something about like they start building that father-son relationship right there, and Darth Vader being like, so you have learned to accept the truth and all this stuff, and it's a really important little scene that does so much to build their little relationship, and him like looking at Luke's lightsaber, like your training is complete. All that stuff sets up, like if that scene was not there and was not done so well in that little subtle way, because I think it's a scene that people tend to overlook.
It's a phenomenal scene.
It's such a good scene. It's so vital for then establishing for when Darth Vader decides to destroy the Emperor. It's because of that scene. Because that's the only moment in all three of these movies that Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker are father and son at all. Like, that's the only moment they have alone together. That they're not trying to kill each other, basically.
Exactly. And I do love there's this, like, weird comfort with each other in this scene where, like, Vader just has him uncuffed, takes his lightsaber, disarms him technically, but then they're just walking. Neither one is, like, physically wary of the other in that moment. There's this, like, weird level of, like, enemies meeting in a space of like almost weird trust. It's a very interesting, like, layered sequence.
Yeah. Particularly at the very end of that sequence where Luke is trying to get Vader to, Luke's doing like, I sense there is good in you, like, come back. And then Vader has this line, and this is another area where I think like the prequel connection works really well for me, because I can just kind of feel Anakin in this line, is when Darth Vader just says, "It's too late for me, son." And there's something very reserved and human about it, because so much of, like, whenever we hear Darth Vader talking, he's threatening someone, he's being very angry, he's being very forceful, or he's, like, mocking people, as he was constantly mocking Luke in the fight in Empire Strikes Back. And here he's just conversational, and, like, there's this, like, just very human moment where you feel in that when he says it's too late, of like this regret of like, I have done so much at this point. And that's where, like, I feel like I can just see in my mind's eye, remember when you like first became Darth Vader and you just murdered all those children? You're right, it's too late for you, buddy. Like, you've done a lot,
James Earl Jones is so good, and it is an amazing vocal performance, but I don't want to forget David Prowse.
Yeah.
It's a 50-50. You do not get one without the other. And frankly, it might be more than 50-50 because Prowse is the guy on set. And that's why James Earl Jones, this is the first movie he took a credit on. If you watch the special editions, he's credited in all of them. If you're doing the theatrical cuts, Jones's name does not show up until Return of the Jedi. Prowse is so good at embodying the physicality of Vader. Even though it's like, okay, we don't see his face, so we think, oh, he's not doing much acting. No, there's a lot of acting to that. It's a very more, almost theatrical, almost like kabuki kind of like, not kabuki is even the wrong term, I'm almost thinking more like No or something, where it's very like, it's mask-based, and it's very slow and steady and deliberate, but there is a lot of character building going on there, and then Jones is layering over that and complementing it. But I think the Darth Vader we see in this movie especially, even more so than the other two, is just a masterclass of performance. And it's two performances coming together, but it is a masterclass.
Yeah, because in this movie, Darth Vader is not the villain anymore. He's like almost like an anti-hero at some point.
Weirdly, the original Star Wars trilogy has a different villain in each movie.
Yeah.
I would say the primary villain of the first one is not Vader, it is Grand Moff Tarkin.
Yeah.
Vader is the primary villain of Empire, and then it's the Emperor in this one. And it is actually something that I think as a trilogy structure works really well of building that. And it's something, I don't know if they'll be able to wind up doing that in the sequel trilogy, because it's basically Kylo Ren in the first two, but he's also the protagonist, sort of, and it's sort of Snoke. But
and who knows? I'm so curious to see if the Snoke is addressed in any way in Episode 9. It's weird.
Yeah. So, but I do think it's a very clean structure to have in these, because it doesn't feel repetitious, and it feels like the characters, including Vader, are constantly moving forward. Speaking of which, the Emperor.
Yes.
Our first sight of Ian McDiarmid in the Star Wars universe.
His first performance as the Emperor, but then his last within the context of the chronology of the interior Star Wars universe.
And how eerie is it that it works so perfectly?
Yeah.
Because we've done the thing where we watch them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It does not feel like this was the performance that preceded 1, 2, 3. It feels like, oh yeah, he's just aged 30 years, and this is the same guy we saw in those first 3 movies. Yeah, he's spent
all those years sitting in these weird rooms, just sort of cackling to himself, like almost like descending into a weird form of madness. Almost, yeah. He's off the fucking rocker at this point. In a way, it's great.
It is crazy how thoroughly McDiarmid had the character down from the word go in this movie. It is a fully fleshed out performance. immediately, and that is amazing because this is a guy we've been hearing about for 2 films.
Yeah.
And then he actually comes in somewhat nonchalantly early in the film.
Yeah.
And he's perfect. It is also crazy how much he recaptured and then expanded upon it in the prequels. It is the most seamless thing between the prequels and the trilogy.
Especially because in the prequels, he has to do the weird thing of, like, being him, but being a normal person, and then slowly over the movies until you get to episode 3 where he's like, "Nah, motherfuckers, I'm the Emperor! Ha-ha! Power!"
It's insane. Because when you get to episode 3, that's 22 years later.
Yeah.
That is nuts. Obviously he has heavier makeup here because he was a much younger man.
Yeah.
But, my God, he's so great. He's so great.
The performance is amazing. It's like the right level of over the top. Like,
Yep.
it's undeniable that it's over the top, but it fucking works so perfectly.
Because, this is a big question of, like, you've got your big, mysterious bad that you've been teasing, but we haven't really... There's the scene in episode 5, but it's brief and it's a hologram.
And in the original versions that you saw, it's not even him.
Right. So this is like his big debut into the franchise, and you're either going to go too far or not far enough, and they nail it. They hit exactly the right note here.
And part of it is just that set is so amazing, and just the atmosphere on that set. And particularly, there's this shot they love so much of the Emperor right and sitting in the chair right in the middle of the frame with that big window that like kind of looks like the cockpit of a TIE fighter or something with like these weird interjoining metal bars that create this pattern. That shot is so fucking beautiful.
It's great.
It's great.
I love that the Emperor also is a character before we get to all the third act stuff.
Yeah.
That, like, he has a couple scenes with Vader where we see a little bit of their relationship. And that there is
little Emperor Vader walk and talk I like.
Walk and talk, and then later there's the scene where Vader comes back to the Death Star.
Right,
and the Emperor is kind of angry that he's come back to consult him. And you feel this tension. Like, it is not like Vader is a complete sycophant. And it is not that the Emperor is completely controlling of him. It is this weird kind of push and pull. And you do get a sense that space between them does exist for Luke to come in.
Yeah.
Before you get there. And I think if you didn't see the Emperor until Luke sees the Emperor, that would be a mistake. Because you wouldn't get a sense of that space.
Yes, yeah. It's specifically, it's when Darth Vader tells the Emperor that Luke is on the Forest Moon. Yeah. And the Emperor hasn't sensed that yet.
Yes, that's a really interesting scene. Because the Emperor is shaken by that. Like, it's because you probably, I imagine in this intervening 30 years, he's had a couple of moments where he's felt like Vader is surpassing me or something.
Or, he definitely knows that Vader is gunning for him. Because, I think that's already probably, established for, the character dynamic in this movie. But then especially in the expanded universe, that's such a, Sith thing of, fucking the dude you're training is going to try to kill you. That's just how it works. It's not a great insurance plan, but hey, it works.
Yeah, so anyway, all that's great. But then these sparks that fly when you get them all together.
Yeah.
It's such a smart piece of storytelling that you culminate Luke's arc he's not the one going to destroy the second Death Star. Yeah. He's not the one leading the ground troops. He is in this very personal battle where the stakes are a weird thing because Luke does not walk into that room with the pretension that he is going to murder Vader, murder the Emperor, walk out with both of their heads and hold them above the troops and be like, you follow me now!
That's fucking go, hit the self-destruct button on the Death Star 2, just jump out into space,
Yeah, there's none of that. It is, we're not even maybe sure for a while in this movie what his ultimate goal is. And what it is to try to thread that needle between these two powerful figures.
Yeah.
But everyone walks into that room with a motivation. Darth Vader's is maybe the most mysterious because I think he's the most conflicted walking into that room. But Luke's is that he wants to redeem his father and bring Vader over to their side. The Emperor wants to corrupt Luke and bring him over and have him murder Darth Vader. That's his plan.
Murder and replace Darth Vader.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of people want Luke to murder Darth Vader in this movie.
Yes, good people and bad people.
Yes.
Or maybe they're all bad people.
Exactly. And what it ultimately is it's not as simple as just Luke wins. It's Luke is tempted. Yeah. And he does get pissed off by Vader, and they do have this fight, and the Emperor does get under his skin, and then Luke realizes what he is becoming. He sees that in himself. He has this intense moment of self-reflection. He throws the lightsaber away, and the culmination of his character arc is not a grand victory of a duel or anything like that. It is this very internal, whether he lives or dies there, he's become the man he was becoming over the course of this trilogy when he throws the lightsaber away. And then the redemption of Vader feels so thoroughly earned because of that. I just think we'll talk about all the production and acting stuff that goes into it. It's a phenomenal piece of writing.
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing that it still feels kind of bold and interesting a choice now, because like the instinct is so to have the big epic battle, you know, like do what they eventually did makes sense here in episode 3 between Obi-Wan and Anakin, because Obi-Wan can't do the Luke thing. Like Obi-Wan's not in that headspace. That's not what the Jedi quite are. You know, and so, but that's like we're going to have the massive confrontation between these two powerful entities. And for Luke, it is this it's more about the ideological and like spiritual victory that is important, because that's the world that Star Wars is. You know, like emotion and feeling and thought is more. It's what Yoda says. We're luminous beings, not this crude matter. It's like winning on that level is what is actually important. And if Luke destroys the Emperor and destroys Darth Vader, but gives into those negative, corrupting emotions, he replaces them in the future.
Yes.
Right? And so, the only way he can be victorious is to show, especially to show Darth Vader that there is a better way, that it's never too late to be redeemed, you know?
And the best scene in all of theatrical Star Wars, I think by far, comes in this section where Luke and Vader start dueling, and there is we cut away for a while, we come back, Luke is hiding somewhere.
Yes, it's after Darth Vader throws the lightsaber up, which is the first lightsaber throw in Star Wars history, and video game designers around the world stood up and went, that's pretty cool. We should put that in a video game. And then it cuts away to the other battles, and then comes back, and Luke's hiding, and Darth Vader's stalking underneath the walkway that the Emperor's on. Going
back to serial killer Vader from Empire, and he has the whole line, about or maybe sister.
You have a twin sister.
I also love that.
Join me, perhaps she will.
And then Luke goes crazy. But I also do love that canonically Vader is learning that he had a daughter in that moment and digesting it.
Yeah.
And you actually do he's being the badass bad guy there, but you do feel it in the performance of that's a big revelation. I'm going to have a talk with this fucking Emperor dude about that, because he concealed a lot from me. Anyway, but yes, and then Luke goes after him, and I think the best single shot in all of Star Wars, one of my favorite shots in any mainstream Hollywood movie ever, is when you have this. There's a couple things leading up to it, but it is that long shot away from the action. They are on the other side of the room. They're actually shooting through some of the pillars and stairs and things.
Yeah.
And Vader and Luke is going after Vader and just pummeling, and John Williams' score just rises to this ominous fever pitch of tortured voices singing out. As my brother Thomas pointed out, it is actually a dark inversion of the Imperial March playing on the soundtrack, and it's just beating and beating and beating as the camera pans along with them.
Yeah, he's beating Darth Vader back, and the camera's slowly panning with them.
It is. And they're both in black, and the two lightsabers are basically the light source of the image. It is a masterful composition.
It's so gorgeous, yeah.
And just the emotion. I've seen this movie so many goddamn times. The emotion you feel in that scene. Because that also leads up to him getting Vader onto the little bridge and getting him down to the ground and cutting his arm off.
Just bashing into his lightsaber and knocking the lightsaber blade and cutting his hand off. Yeah, it's good.
And then, this is the thing, it's great writing, but it is also so well directed because so much of this is purely visual storytelling.
Yeah.
That thing with, the scene we just talked about is such great visual storytelling of where Luke's mind and emotions are at. But then when he cuts off Vader's hand, and Luke does not have a monologue there where he goes I have become what I hated. He doesn't do that. He looks, we see that Vader had a robotic arm. Luke kind of glances at his hand. We make the connection that Luke is making. We feel what he's feeling.
It's a nice echo of the cave scene in Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
Of Luke cutting off the fake Darth Vader's head and the mask exploding, him seeing himself underneath there. It's the same thing, but in the real world. It's actually, there is this connection between us. I see where I could become you.
And if you talk about the prequel thing again, because Episode 6 really is the first of the original trilogy where the prequels matter,
Yes, because that's where it sets up all the backstory that then the prequels go and do.
Right.
Yeah.
There is a lot of weight behind this scene of that I do think the prequels add a lot to. Of Luke is not just avoiding this one mistake; he is acting upon knowledge that we have seen through the prequels of this horrible cycle of violence and anger and the fallen hero. And what he does there is symbolic not just of Luke's arc, not just of Vader's arc, but of the entire Star Wars saga up to this point. It really is culminatory in a way that it wouldn't be if it's just the 3 movies. It's beautifully culminatory just for this trilogy. It's extra culminatory for the 6 movies.
Yes, because you have all the tragedy of the prequels needs to be sort of redeemed in this moment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing stuff. All right. I guess we should talk about... I mean, do we want to talk about... We already talked about a little bit the scene that follows where Vader betrays the Emperor. What else to say about it? I mentioned how bad the special edition change is, and why it's bad is it's such a great scene.
It's such a good scene. Just everything about it, just like the sense of the Emperor just like letting go and be like, okay, fine. And first force lightning.
Well, because I love like when Luke throws down the lightsaber and says he won't fight, the Emperor has a genuinely like stunned look on his face.
Yeah,
like
he did not see that coming. He didn't really recognize that as being a choice that someone could make.
No, he is completely out of his element, and so he's like, fuck it, I'm going to kill this kid and figure it all out later. And he's electrocuting, and Luke calls out for his father. Great Mark Hamill moment there.
Father, help!
Please!
Yeah.
It's wonderful. And what I love is that Vader, a character who is so defined for the audience through that iconic voice, through James Earl Jones, the most important of all Darth Vader moments, no dialogue.
Yes.
He looks back, he looks to Luke, he looks to the Emperor, he looks to Luke, he looks to the Emperor, he thinks, he considers, and then he makes the choice.
Yeah.
And we read it into the mask, we read it into the movements, we let it exist in the atmosphere. It's why adding...
It's communicated by the editing. It's another like masterful example of visual storytelling of that would be hard to do in like a stage play because you need that focus of the camera to tell you what Vader is like, to make it very dramatic what Vader is choosing.
Such a smart culmination of that character. And again, it's why that special edition change is so bad. Because it takes away the most powerful thing about that sequence, which is that Vader doesn't talk.
Yeah.
And it misunderstands what makes the sequence good. And but who cares? We have the despecialized edition now, and man, it's so powerful. I love it. He picks up the Emperor, throws him over. The Williams score comes up. I love the shot of the Emperor falling down the giant pit and then like exploding at the bottom. And also David Prowse does such great work portraying like how much that drains Vader and like sets him on the path towards death basically here.
Yeah, I love the way they tweak his breathing sound effect to like wounded Vader. Like it really sells.
Because you've been hearing it for 3 movies.
Yeah, and then now all of a sudden it's like this like pained wheeze. It's pretty rough.
What do you think of the Sebastian Stan scene where we have Vader with the mask off and it's our 3rd Vader actor?
God, I love that scene. I will say the one special edition change I do like is them getting rid of the eyebrows.
It does work better. It's weird that he has eyebrows.
Yeah, he shouldn't have eyebrows. Weird, whatever, but
apparently his face was covered in like horrible 3rd-degree burns, but he did save the eyebrows.
Yes, he got the eyebrows surgically fixed. So.
Maybe there's an expanded universe novel about this.
I would not be surprised if it was addressed somewhere before it got special editioned out of existence.
Disney got an idea of Vader's eyebrows, a Star Wars story.
Kylo Ren has Vader's eyebrows in like an altar, back in his room. He's like, I got these. I saved these from the fire.
It's a Queer Eye spinoff where the Queer Eye guys come in and try to give Darth Vader a makeover, and what he really needs are new eyebrows.
Because that is actually kind of the thing is it's not just eyebrows. They're like these big, bushy, black eyebrows, so it's like you kind of can't ignore them. But other than that, because that's like such a dumb quibble, it doesn't actually matter. But it's like one of the handful of changes they made that's like, I agree with that change. But... yeah, that whole scene I just love. I love just the, because that's after we have all the stuff with Lando blowing up, the Death Star's 2 starting to explode, and everybody's just panicking and running away. And I love that everyone's so afraid for their own life that they don't really notice that Darth fucking Vader is there, like dying, and Luke cradles him and drags him onto the ramp. And it's the last lines that James Earl Jones has is Luke, take this mask off.
Yeah.
But you will die. Nothing can stop that now. This is the last line he has in this.
Let me see you one last time with my own eyes.
Yeah, and Luke, I love the process of, he has to take off the little top samurai thingy, and then he kind of has to look around and figure out how to take the mask off. And that whole reveal and the way that the music sort of quiets down in that moment, it's like sort of drowns out a little bit.
And you basically see what's left of this man.
Yeah,
right?
this tortured, old, broken man, yeah, that this is his his only moment of like mild redemption that he has, and getting to see his son. And then I think Mark Hamill plays it so beautifully.
And I think Sebastian Stan is really good in that scene too. I'm saying that's not right. That's Bucky from...
Yeah, it's Sebastian Shaw.
Sebastian Shaw,
yeah.
Sorry.
I make the same mistake because they're very similar names.
Yeah, okay. So Sebastian Shaw is correct. Anyway.
It's like, man, I can't believe that Sebastian Stan played, old Darth Vader, and then now look at him as the Winter Soldier. It's crazy.
He might not have been born at this point. Who knows? Anyway, yes. No, he's good at portraying, like, the last remnants of humanity in this guy. Because that's what he's tasked to play here, right? It's like whatever is left. And I do love it. I love that he, like, cries a little bit. I love that you just see, like, Anakin kind of go out with whatever's left there. It's not an ending where it says, like, he's a hero now and we love him.
Oh, yeah.
But it is... There was something that, like, Luke was right. And that's his last line.
Yeah, there was goodness left in this guy, and that's the last thing you see.
And that's his last line. It says, you were right. Mm-hmm. And Luke having to kind of live with that, because it's a powerful thing to hear. And, like, this is what Luke wanted, but also being, confronted with it is hard. It's an emotionally draining moment. And then he's got to get off the fucking Death Star with his dad's body. And then we have the end of the movie, which I love. I think... Everything with the funeral pyre and the Williams hue there going into the final sequence, whether it is Yub Nub or whether it is the special edition one, I just think it's such a great like final celebration scene. I love having everyone come back together. I love how much you do feel like Luke comes back as such a changed man through all of this. When he glances back at the Force ghosts and they are so proud and he sees Vader redeemed there, the sense of like culmination of Luke's arc and what he has achieved and how personal it feels is really something special, I think, that makes that ending. It really sends off Return of the Jedi on a high note for me. Yeah,
and we talked about it a little bit earlier with the Han Solo stuff, but it is like that scene is one of the scenes that makes it feel like Han Solo shouldn't have died in this movie because you do want... Because Star Wars should be optimistic and hopeful, ultimately, and I think that's like the right call, and having this massive celebration of where the Empire has fallen, the Emperor is dead, we've blown up the Death Star again, and I killed my dad. I kind of half killed my dad. My dad's dead. But, hey, my friends are all here and we can have fun.
Yeah.
And my ghost buddies are here. And yes, they are real. My ghost friends are real. I'm not hallucinating. They're my real ghost, all three of my ghost dads. My three ghost dads of Luke Skywalker's story.
Yes. Anyway, that actually sounds like that should be like the young adult novel about Luke's story.
Yeah.
It's a diary. Dear diary. Today, I got to see all three of my dads as ghosts.
Ghost dads.
Yeah. All right. So, theatrical edition ending or special edition ending? Let's talk about this for a second.
Yes. And there's like a couple of different special edition endings.
We'll go with like the 2004 version, which is where they added Hayden Christensen in. Okay. In the original, he comes back. The Ewoks are playing their song Yub Nub.
Yub Nub.
And that's what goes into the credits. And it's just the characters on Endor. It does not go anywhere else. It does not show anything else. It is very personal and small scale, and it is with the Ewoks, and just that's the end of the movie, and they're smiling, and it goes to credits. In the special edition, it adds in cutaways to a bunch of other planets. It does this between the funeral pyre and Luke coming back. We go to like Coruscant, and we go to Naboo, and in the 2004 edition, you actually do see Jar Jar on top of a roof, or a Gungan.
Yeah, it's probably just a Gungan. Jar Jar would be pretty old at that point. I don't know if he could climb up on that roof.
That's true. Someone goes, Misa free!
Yeah.
And that's what it is. And then you come back, and it's basically the same scene. It's edited a little different. The Sebastian Shaw Force Ghost is replaced by Hayden Christensen as young Anakin Skywalker. And although Obi-Wan is not, it's still Alec Guinness Obi-Wan. They did not Ewan McGregor him. And the score is completely replaced. It is not Yub Nub anymore. It is a new composition by both are by John Williams. Some people are wrong about that, saying like Yub Nub was not. No, Yub Nub is John Williams. It's John Williams replacing John Williams.
Yeah.
But it is a new John Williams composition that's a little bit bigger and more forceful. It does make all the scenes of Ewoks playing instruments weirdly non-diegetic, which is they are in the movie. So that's a little like awkward. But yeah, those are the two versions. I'm a little torn. I think I come down on the side of I do like the theatrical edition ending more. What do you think?
I like both, but I like the special edition ending more. Like I know that this is an unpopular change, but I like that they replaced him with Hayden Christensen.
I do. I actually agree with that one completely because I think especially if you're thinking of this as the 6-film saga, there is, I think, something emotionally powerful about seeing young Anakin again. And, that really does signal a restoration that the guy we've only seen for 5 minutes doesn't. So, if you're just viewing this as the trilogy itself, it doesn't really matter one way or the other. I agree, though, about the Hayden Christensen.
Yeah, that's just one of where, when you see Sebastian Shaw there, it has no real dramatic impact.
Right.
Because it doesn't even really look like the same dude. It's you just have to, assume, that's gotta be Anakin, right? But he has hair and everything. It's last time he had a very tall head and no hair, but very bushy eyebrows.
What if it was just Vader as a Force ghost, in the costume and everything?
He's just looking over at Obi-Wan, fake, pantomiming laughing because he has no mouth.
And he waves, really, hey,
Luke, I'm the son. I'm over here. Just have fun at the dance. Not too much fun, hey? Don't come home too late.
You keep an eye on your sister now.
Yeah. No, but and I do think because some people will not take any special edition changes. I guess that's fine. But I do think when people say that, the Hayden Christensen change doesn't make sense because why is he young Hayden, young Anakin Skywalker, and it's old Obi-Wan and it's old Yoda? It's because fucking Obi-Wan and Yoda never turned to evil. Right? The Anakin we see is the Anakin that was as he was when he was the
It even
the Jedi
echoes
Knight.
Obi-Wan's whole reasoning about Anakin Skywalker being killed by Darth Vader.
Yes, exactly. It's something where it makes dramatic sense to me so much that have that version. I also just like the sense of for the rest of that full ending of that they have. Because I feel the point of the story very much is they have dealt the fatal blow to the Empire, right?
Yeah.
The Empire is donezo. They made 2 Death Stars, lost both Death Stars, only destroyed 1 planet out of 2 Death Stars. They've got a negative 1 KD spread on fucking Death Stars at this point. That's pretty rough, right? So the financials have got to be in the toilet. And the Emperor's dead, and then the Emperor's second command is dead, and the Emperor's whatever Grand Moff Tarkin is, he's been dead for a while. So it's there's this sense of the Empire is really destroyed, and I like the seeing that in the galaxy. And again, I think if it's only these 3 movies, it makes sense that it very much makes sense that you wouldn't cut the Coruscant and shit because those planets don't exist yet, really. But when you have all 6 movies, it would feel weird if all it was this here we have 20 people and a couple of teddy bears having a big dance in the forest. There's something about that's so small scale it feels wrong.
Yes, I do like the special edition ending. I think it is the best thing in the special editions.
Yeah.
It's the far and away the most positive change. It is the most, I think, substantial positive change. There are little things like the eyebrows that we like, but that is the one that I think is great. If I could, somehow attach it on to the rest of the theatrical edition, I'd watch that. It'd be cool. I do think, end of the day, to me, all this fucking tinkering, the movie is the movie. It's the theatrical cut. I'm fine with that. And there is something about the intimacy of the original ending and that it continues to be just on Luke with them together that does feel right to me. I like both versions of the song. I think Yub Nub is actually an underrated composition. I think it's very good and moving in its own way. But I also think the one Williams wrote in 97 for the special edition is fucking gorgeous and perfect. So, take your pick. They're both great. I do not necessarily feel like I'm missing anything when I watch the theatrical cut of this one.
No.
But it is definitely the best special edition change.
Yeah. And it is I think it is that thing of if you're just watching the original trilogy and those 3 movies, the theatrical version is the right way, is the right ending for those. If you're looking at it as a 6-movie saga, the special edition is the right way to go.
Yeah. Maybe if Disney is not going to give us, the theatrical cuts, maybe they could just do a sanitized special edition where they get rid of the stupid shit and leave in the good shit.
I mean, that's what I want. If at the end of the day, honestly, that is what I want. It's because I have and I can watch the theatrical versions. I want the good special editions that take out the eyebrows, that fix up some of the bad lightsaber effects, fix up some of the weird green screeny kind of the normal updates. I want that because Star Wars is this especially now, it is this big living franchise.
Sure, yeah.
And it makes sense to have updated modern versions of those movies alongside. Of course, I never want the original versions to be inaccessible in any way.
Right.
That would be the ideal, is if you could buy one Blu-ray that had just Stop me if you think that sounds crazy, but buy one Blu-ray that has both the original version of the movie on it that is cleaned up in a nice way, and an updated version that takes some of those special edition changes, and you can select both of them on one disc. That sounds nuts, right?
Or even at most 2 discs that you swap.
Yes, yeah. If you need
no one's ever done this, Sean.
Yeah, no, that's absurd.
This is technology we just don't have.
Yeah.
Again, I will go back to the point I made in our episode 4 podcast. Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out the same year as Star Wars A New Hope. It has had 2 different Blu-ray releases with 2 different 4K remasters where on one disc they have 3 separate versions of the movie. That has been done twice.
Yeah, like you can buy fucking Doctor Who episodes from like the 70s that have the old original versions and versions with like updated effects, and you can just choose which one you want to watch. So they don't destroy the old version, and they also don't let it just like linger and never tinker with it.
Star Wars is the only notable property that does this.
Yeah, it's like you can do both. There's nothing stopping anybody.
No. All right. Any last thoughts on Return of the Jedi?
It's a good movie. It's a weird movie. It's a fun movie to talk about.
So let's wrap up our Star Wars discussion that has taken... It was going to take 6 months. It took 7 months. I don't know which month we skipped, but... Yeah.
You know, we skipped a month or whatever with the Doctor Who one. We skipped a month with this one also.
Yes. What have you learned about Star Wars? Or what new perspective do you have after doing this project? Because this is the most in-depth I've ever watched them.
Yes, yeah, me too. I mean, I think for me, I don't think my opinions on the original trilogy changed almost at all. Yeah. With these ones, it's like it was fun to sort of like sit down with you and talk about them and like kind of get because I have thought a lot about Star Wars.
Yes,
people know this, so like my opinions on those did not change. For me, it was more the prequel stuff. Of my opinions on particularly Episode 1 and 2 and even Episode 3 changed quite a bit because a lot of those movies I hadn't seen in a long time. The last time I saw Episodes 4 through 6 was right before fucking Force Awakens came out. Yeah. So it wasn't that long ago. But yeah, for the prequels, I have such a bigger appreciation for them. I always liked them a lot more than the average person seemed to. But now I legitimately love and respect those movies, both in an academic sense, and I feel like I have reclaimed them for me personally, and I like that there is a bigger sentiment out there in the culture that appreciates and enjoys those movies also.
I agree completely with all of that. As far as the original trilogy goes, nothing really changed in my perception of 4 or 5. Other than, again, WoW! A New Hope is a 70s-ass 70 movie.
Yeah.
And WoW! Is Return of the Jedi an 80s-ass 80s movie.
Yes.
Empire is kind of the most timeless of them. And even then, it's kind of straddling that line. I do think Return of the Jedi hit me harder this time. Both it's good and it's bad. I think it really all came home for me, and I really... Again, the bad stuff hit me worse as being bad, but the good stuff also hit me much harder as being good. And this is one of those, I watched this one a lot as a kid because it was kind of most kid-friendly, so I've seen it a lot. So that definitely changed, and I agree about the prequels. I think the reason I wanted to do this was I kind of had a thesis that I wanted to test, or a hypothesis, I should say, of that I think the prequels are kind of required viewing at this moment in history, both politically, culturally, but also in terms of, I think, where film is and where blockbusters have gone and where video games have gone and where just visual art is at the mainstream mass media visual art. And I think the prequels are really important viewing right now in the year 2018 where all of those things intersect, because I don't think you can have a full understanding of how movies are made today without the prequels. I don't think you can have a full understanding of how video game art direction works without the prequels. And obviously you can have a full understanding of politics without stupid Star Wars movies, but I do think those are eerily prescient, smart movies about a political moment that maybe in the early 2000s no one wanted to fully admit we were in. Yeah. Because obviously plenty of people knew the Bush years were fucking awful, but I don't know if we wanted to admit how far down a rabbit hole they were taking us. But we all know now, and I think the prequels are of their moment, but also of this moment. And I think the new Star Wars movies have some really interesting political resonance as well that I think they should lean into even heavier next time in Episode 9, because I think we've debated about how well the First Order is used, but I think they have a fucking gold mine there if they want it.
It's the right premise.
It is completely the right premise.
Poor execution mostly.
Yeah, I think Last Jedi does it better, but
of course it does. It does everything better.
But I think the prequels too. Like the prequels are much more politically engaged movies, historically engaged movies than they get credit for.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad we got to talk about them because those are fascinating movies. They should be seen and they should be talked about. And you don't have to like them. You don't have to love them. They should be discussed. They should be taken seriously and they should be discussed as really integral pieces of the modern mainstream Hollywood cinema landscape. And I hope if we've achieved nothing else, I hope we've made some people think about them differently.
Yes.
Not like them, just think about them.
Yes. Because I think there is enough of a distance now that it is like, and this is one of the reasons why it feels like we are not the only people kind of doing this right now, and like within the past year or two. There's enough of a distance on those prequels and the Disney Star Wars, whatever it is now, has created this opportunity to kind of reassess those movies. And now that like the most rabid, disgusting part of the Star Wars thing is like latched desperately onto The Last Jedi in a way that grows ever more terrifying each day that passes. But like since they're like, chewing that movie to fucking death, we can now talk about the prequels and have a sane conversation about the prequels and not have them come out of the woodwork, right?
I also think it's because the conversation about the prequels was set by older people who had been kids when Star Wars came out and were now adults or were critics who were never that engaged in it, maybe. And now I think the people who grew up with the prequels are grown up like we are and can have an in-depth critical conversation about them. And I think that's just naturally going to change the conversation because they weren't necessarily for you.
Yes.
Not you, Sean, you hypothetical old critic.
I can't wait until one day there's somebody making a podcast, whatever replaces the podcast, talking about how when we never got it in Rogue One is actually the best Star Wars movie.
That terrifies me. All right, Sean, I'm going to make you play a little game.
Oh, God.
We're going to rank these motherfuckers.
Guys, I knew that you were going to do this. Not in the sense of that you actually told me. I just you fucking love this shit. And I still didn't prepare. I knew you were going to fucking spring this on me, and I was like, I should think this through, and then I started thinking it through for 10 seconds, I want to make this list.
I know, it's going to be really hard. The best one is Empire, right?
Yes, that's done.
So we can put 5 at the top.
And it's only these 6, right? We're not
only these
thinking
6
about the Disney era movies.
That would be impossible, no. It's a different thing. All right, 5 is the best. I'm not going to ask you what the worst is yet because I don't know either.
Yes. No.
Let's rank, because I think this is easy. Original trilogy is 5, 4, 6, right?
Oh, yes.
It's 5.
Quality.
Yes. So 5, 4, 6. Okay. I think the prequels are 3, 1, 2.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. So now we have separate, we have the two. So if we come to no other conclusive, you know what our thoughts are on the two trilogies.
Yeah.
5, 4, 6, 3, 1, 2.
Uh-huh.
Now how do we mix those?
I hate you.
4 versus 3. Go.
Oh, fuck.
Do you want to plant a flag and be the person who says Star Wars Episode 3 is better than Star Wars Episode 4? Because I think there's an argument to be made.
There is 100% an argument to be made, and it's because, obviously the original Star Wars is one of the most important movies ever, and it's hugely influential in terms of narrative content, in terms of how it changed the blockbuster landscape, in terms of special effects, all that shit. In terms of the importance of Star Wars movies in cinematic history, it's 4 and 5 are at the top, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. But there are things about I know you've always held these sort of Star Wars Episode 4 is a perfect movie thing. I've never quite. I think there are things about it that kind of ruffle me a bit. I think some of the dialogue goes a bit too far, and it is very silly. Just as bad, if not worse, as some of the worst stuff in the prequels. I think it has a little of niggling pacing issues for me. I think the Death Star stuff goes on a bit too long in the middle, and so the third act feels a little strangely paced. But obviously, Episode 3 has its flaws also, but it also just has some fucking...
3 has the highs of a culmination. 4 is a great entry into a world. 3 is a fantastic culmination of many things. If there is an argument to be made for 3 going over 4, maybe that's where we're headed, I don't know. One thing I would say is, we said this at the time, Episode 4 is all surface. I think it is the least substantial in terms of themes and ideas of all 6 of these movies.
Absolutely.
Now, that's not everything. I would still say, I think Episode 2 has more on its mind, but I'm never going to say Episode 2 is better than Episode 4, right? But, if you put 3 and 4 together, we had way more to talk about with 3. Now, part of that is just that there has been less critical reevaluation of that movie, and there's not a ton left to say about Star Wars Episode 4. But also, maybe there's not as much meat on the bones of Star Wars Episode 4 as there is on the bones of Star Wars Episode 3.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something to consider.
Because I think with Episode 4, what ends up happening with that movie, and for understandable reasons, but it drives me fucking up the wall, is all the fucking hero's journey stuff, which is like, it's there to a certain extent. Yes, like, I disagree with a lot of like Campbell's monomyth stuff. I think like the literary culture has mostly moved away from the monomyth concept and is poked, as happens, poked like billions of holes in it. And I don't think that Star Wars is necessarily that thing, and so like the conversation around that movie gets swallowed up by it. And it's like, it is such like a strong, functional sort of like boy goes out into the world, becomes a hero kind of story, and it's amazing in that sense. But there is so much in there in Episode 3 for sure, and it is that the culminating moments of Episode 3 and everything that like once shit really hits the fan, it's a really sort of incredible film.
We're definitely going to put 3 above 6, right?
Oh, yes. Yes, definitely.
3 is a better movie than 6.
Yeah, no question in my mind.
Let's revisit 4 versus 3 in a second.
I do want to just, like, while we're still talking about Episode 3, I just want to note that there is no other Star Wars movie other than Episode 3 where Ian McDiarmid just shouts out, "Unlimited power!" And that's definitely a point in its favor.
It is great. I also don't want to rank how good Episode 4 is.
Oh, no.
And how it is just pound for pound such an amazing introduction to this world. It has such good characters. It has such amazing sights like the binary sunset. It launched this thing that we're still talking about. And it is just on its own, take it out from everything else. It is just a great, fun movie.
But like one of the things I want to do with this list is not let the historical importance in that like overshadow everything. I don't want it to be like every video game ranking ever that like has fucking Super Mario Brothers 1 is like the best video game ever made. Because like I'm tired of doing that shit.
Right. Okay. So, but 4 or 3 are going to be at this spot.
Yes.
We'll figure that out in a second.
One of those is number 2.
6 versus Episode 1.
That's a really hard one.
That's also tough.
Yeah, that is a really hard one. I think because Episode 1 is definitely a way more consistent movie, but it doesn't have it
does not have the highs.
Yeah, Duel of the Fates is an incredible sequence, but it doesn't have, because it's it's the first movie, it's the first time we've seen these characters. It doesn't have all the emotional weight behind it that the conclusion of Episode 6 has.
So would you put Episode 6 above Episode 1?
I don't know.
Would you put Episode 6 above Episode 2?
Yes.
Do you think Episode 2 is probably the bottom of this list?
Yes, which does not make it a bad movie.
No, I think Episode 2, we both really like that one.
Yeah.
It has the most holes in it.
But it's better than Rogue One. So it's not. We're not putting any of those on this list. I just want it to be clear it's not the worst Star Wars movie.
Rogue One is the worst Star Wars movie. All of these are better than the 2 spin-offs. I kind of like Solo. These are all better than those. All the episodes are better than the fucking spin-offs. All right. So this could go 5, 4, or 3. We'll figure that out. 6, 1, 2. Do you think that's the general contours of this list?
That's definitely the general contours of this list. Yes.
Okay.
We've got I think the 2 fights we need to have is 3 versus 4 and 6 versus 1.
Part of me, just to be a fucking contrarian, wants to put 1 above. Because I do think The Phantom Menace is a vastly better movie than it gets. I think the delta between the actual quality of Phantom Menace and its cultural reputation is greater than any movie I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Easily. I cannot think of another one that cultural reputation versus I think what that movie actually is higher. I have near equal amounts of nostalgia for Phantom Menace and Episode 6 because...
I have more nostalgia for 6 than 1.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I kind of want to also put 1 above 6 because it's like I feel like my mind is clearer.
I honestly might have more nostalgia about Episode 1 because I can remember actually seeing it. It's the first one I can... And that summer, I can just... God, it was everywhere.
With that one specifically, it's weird because I remember coming back... Like, this is one of the earliest Star Wars memories I specifically have is coming back from seeing Episode 1 and telling my mom, I want to watch Star Wars. And it's like, well, we didn't have... So it's like we had a tape of Return of the Jedi from a television that we had taped over. We had recorded on a VHS because this was the 90s and we fucking rolled like that. And I specifically because we didn't have the VHS versions of 1 and 2 or 4 and 5. What if fuck you talking about these movies? And so I distinctly remember that I just really wanted to watch another Star Wars movie and the only one we had at hand was Return of the Jedi. So it's that's why I got. And so those movies are directly related in my mind in a lot of ways.
Okay, so let's put it this way, Sean. The worst thing about Episode 1 is Jake Lloyd. I don't want to just pick on the kid, but like that performance, that character.
Yeah.
The worst thing about Episode 6 is Endor Ewoks Han Solo.
I mean, nothing in Episode 1 does the thing that Return of the Jedi does, of where it just hits this brick fucking plot wall and just stops for a full 30 minutes.
Episode 1 also is a truly amazing piece of world building.
Yes, yeah.
It has amazing characters, especially in the form of Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi. It has Darth Maul. It has the best lightsaber duel in any Star Wars film. Probably never to be topped.
In terms of like choreography and all that stuff.
Yes.
For sure.
Episode 6 has the best lightsaber duel in terms of
like
emotion and storytelling. So this is tough. Man, these are both really hard, Sean.
Yeah. Episode 1 has the part where Darth Maul takes off his hood and then pulls out his lightsaber and goes, Bsh! And you're like, oh, that's cool. And he goes, Bsh! And you're like, it has 2. That's really cool.
I think Episode 1 might have a better score than Episode 6.
I agree, yeah.
I think Episode 6, again, like in certain moments, has higher than just about anything else.
Yeah.
But it is not the one where Williams had the most space to innovate. Episode 1, he's going all fresh.
The pod race is better than the speeder scene in Episode 6, which is good. The speeder scene is good, but the pod race is better.
I do think the pod race is too fucking long.
It's too long, but it's still better.
That's true. Heart of Hearts, I would go with 6 above 1. If I'm being honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think I agree with that. But there's also like...
There is an argument to be made.
Episode 1 is more... Or Episode 6 is more sexist than Episode 1, but Episode 1 is more racist than Episode 6. So how do we figure out that one?
I don't know if you figure out that one, because then you're going to have to say, is racism or sexism worse? And I do not think there is an answer to that question, Sean.
I think we're definitely not qualified to.
No, we're not.
No,
as people who do not suffer from either of those things, no, we do not.
I'm just putting it out there because I think it's definitely true.
I mean, I know it's not all about moments, but is there anything in Episode 1 that moves you as intensely as the best parts of Episode 6?
No, definitely not.
I think 6 has to go above 1.
Okay, yeah.
But I think maybe that helps us put 3 above 4 in our blasphemy. And maybe, because I don't know, I feel like there should be one prequel above in one of these contests.
Let's burn this shit down, Jonathan! Bring it down! It's like fucking the scene in The Last Jedi where Yoda destroys the temple where the first Jedi texts are. Which, like, we gotta let go of the past, motherfucker. Episode 3 is better than A New Hope.
Alright, our official... definitive Star Wars rankings.
Fuck, we're putting our names to this.
Jonathan Lack and Sean Chapman.
I can't put an alias.
Jonathan Rolland Lack and Sean Robert Chapman.
Yes, the 2 middle R's.
Yes.
As we called ourselves in our gang.
Number 6, the 6th best Star Wars movie is Episode 2, Attack of the Clones.
Yes.
Number 5, the 5th best is Episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Okay. Yeah.
Number 4, the 4th best is Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. Number 3, the 3rd best Star Wars movie is Episode 4, A New Hope, also known as Star Wars. Number 2, the 2nd best movie in the Star Wars universe is Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And the best Star Wars movie is Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back.
Let's do it. That's the list.